Good evening and welcome to your town hall. Having reached the hour of 6, I hereby call to order the meeting of the town council and inform everybody that, as always, it's being broadcast live. Tonight's invocation will be given by Nathan Barrett, our management analyst, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Cade Silva, a 6th grade student in Onset Trail School. Nathan?
Our Father in heaven, we gather before thee this day and bow our heads in reverence, grateful for thy many gifts. We're grateful for the gift of life and for the gift of health that we enjoy. We're grateful for this town that we live in, and we're grateful for the people who make this such a wonderful place to live. We ask thee, Father, at this time to bless us with thy Spirit, so that we may speak in wisdom and make wise decisions. We ask for a spirit of understanding to be upon us tonight as we discuss town business. And these things, Father, we ask in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Nathan. Kate?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Represent the Onset Trail Coyotes very well. Appreciate that. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bracco.
Here.
Councilmember Davis.
Present.
Councilmember Gillespie.
Present.
Councilmember Priolo.
Present.
Councilmember Morales.
Present.
Vice Mayor Egbert.
Here.
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Quorum present.
Thanks. And as you could hear, 2 of the voices are in the ether. They're joining us by teams. Tonight, you also have a couple presentations, and the first one will be a proclamation declaring the month of October 2023 as Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I'll be presenting it to Ron Bishop, our technology manager, at the podium. Ron, if you'll come join us. Whereas the town of Sahuarita recognizes that it plays a vital role in identifying and protecting its citizens from and responding to cybersecurity threats that may have significant impact to our individual and collective safety and privacy, and whereas critical infrastructure is increasingly reliant on the support of information systems technology, and whereas cybersecurity education and awareness is crucial for everybody. Whereas the Stop, Think, Connect campaign serves as a national cybersecurity public awareness campaign, and whereas the Technology Master Plan has established in January 2019 to enhance and protect the town of Sahuarita's cybersecurity ecosystem, now therefore it be resolved that I, Tom Murphy, the mayor of the town of Sahuarita, on behalf of the town council, do hereby proclaim September 25th, 2023 as Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. And just as a side note, if you ever get an email from me that says I need gift cards, that did not come from me, because I've been hacked many times, mostly to the council.
No, it comes to me, though.
If Bill sends you one and it's for gift cards, that's true. But for me, it is not. So do you want to say a couple words?
Oh, well,
Let me get the picture first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of Town Council for supporting our cybersecurity efforts throughout the years. 2023 marks the 20th anniversary of recognizing October as Cybersecurity Awareness Month. To identify that, we have a number of community events planned as well as our own internal efforts. And tonight, speaking of gift cards, we have some information in the back that's free. We have stickers and information available on how to avoid scams. So please avail yourself of that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. And we'll also be declaring October 23 as Community Planning Month, and if Anna Cassidy, oh, there she is, come join me. Good evening. Good to see you. Whereas change is constant and affects all cities, towns, counties, and other places, and whereas community planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work and live, and whereas community planning provides an opportunity for all residents to be meaningfully involved in making choices that determine the future of their community, and whereas the full benefits of planning requires public officials and citizens to understand, support, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation, and whereas the month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States of America and its territories, and whereas the celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and dedication of the members of our Planning and Zoning Commission and other citizen planners who have contributed their time and expertise to the improvement of the town of Sahuarita. And whereas we recognize that the many valuable contributions made by the professional community and regional planners of the town of Sahuarita, and extend our heartfelt thanks for the continued commitment to public service by these professionals. Now, therefore, it be resolved that I, Tom Murphy, the mayor of the town of Sahuarita, on behalf of the town council, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2023 is Community Planning Month. Congratulations. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Murphy, members of the council. I just want to take a really quick moment to thank all of our citizen planners, a lot of whom are here today, to speak about a big planning project that's going on. You may have heard of Vulcan Asphalt. I think that's why you're all here. So thank you all for paying so much attention to our planning and zoning division as we work through this very complicated project. And also a big thank you to the members of our Planning and Zoning Commission. It has been a really interesting year to be a planning commissioner between the conditional use permit, the start of our general plan 10-year update, which is going to be a very big deal. And tonight on our agenda, we have a very big code amendment happening for our residential zones. So a really great time in planning and zoning with all of the important work we're doing, and big thanks to the community for supporting us.
Thanks. Thanks, Ann. Next is call to the public. With that, at this time, any member of the public is invited to address the town council on any issue that's on tonight's consent agenda or any issue which the town council can lawfully act upon at a future meeting. Pursuant to Arizona open meeting laws, the council may not discuss the items, but individual members of the council may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the council, may ask staff to review the matter, or may ask the matter to be placed on a future agenda. And I do have a few, and I think most of the folks that have presented before know about our light system. Green is the 3 minutes, yellow is 1 minute left, and then red is the end of the 3 minutes. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, we're going to hold pretty strongly to that because we have so many speakers. And as the process rolls forward, we want to keep it timely as we continue the process and move forward. So we start with David Wolf in the most beautifully typed up call to the public card I've ever received. So thank you, David. I appreciate that.
That's what happens when you have a PDF editor.
Okay.
Here we are again. Mayor, council people, town staff, thank you for allowing me the time to address you. Pima County assessor records indicate that Vulcan Materials advised the county almost 6 years ago that they had ceased operations at their Sahuarita facility. According to Pima County, Vulcan is only allowed to remove stored materials from their property, not engage in any further mining, quarrying, or processing based on their current land use code. Pima County assessor records for the land parcel owned by Vulcan, which in the town of Sahuarita, show that the land use code for this property is 3070, which is mining, quarrying, and processing, at least until January 12th, 2018. Use codes are defined by the Arizona Department of Revenue. In addition to the county assessors, these codes are used by most municipalities. At the request of Vulcan almost 6 years ago, the Vulcan property was changed to 0037, which is vacant land industrial. According to the county assessor's commercial property appraisal supervisor, at the beginning of 2018, Vulcan informed their office that this property was not currently in operation. I informed the supervisor that I had recently observed 2 trucks entering and leaving the local Vulcan facility. The supervisor explained that since 2018, although Vulcan is not able to mine, quarry, or process materials, they are able to remove materials that were previously mined, quarried, and processed, and currently stored on the property. In other words, Vulcan's property is not in operation, but they are allowed to remove stored material. The county supervisor then informed me that as a result of my phone call, they scheduled a special check to verify that the information of the property was accurate. This included a site visit, which occurred 2 months ago. I'm sharing this information with the town staff to ensure that you are aware that according to Pima County, the Vulcan sand and gravel operation is currently not mining, quarrying, or processing material on-site at their Sahuarita facility. Their facility ceased operation almost 6 years ago. They are only removing stored materials. Vulcan continues to remove materials. In their 2022 CUP, they stated that they had 6,615 trucks of stored material removed from the site. Please consider what impact the current land use as vacant land industrial may have on Vulcan's ability to maintain their non-conforming use of the property as a sand and gravel pit, and any future conditional use as a hot mix asphalt plant. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Mark Zimmerman. And after Mark, Dwayne Elser.
Honorable Murphy, council members, and town staff, my name is Mark Zimmerman, and I am a volunteer of Concerned Citizens of Sahuarita, we commonly call CCS. CCS would like the following questions to be entered into the town of Sahuarita public record. We expect the town of Sahuarita, the mayor and council and town staff, to make every effort to find and provide the answers to these questions. I've submitted them to you all. You all have a copy. Number 1, the top of the proposed stack on the proposed Vulcan plant is below ground or near ground level, which will adversely affect pollutant dispersal in the atmosphere. Pollutants will be released at or below ground level, which will reduce the dilution of the plume as it is transported downwind. Ground level concentrations may be higher than predicted by simple mathematical methods and models. Did the EPA envisage and approve a below ground installation such as this when the general permit was granted for hot asphalt plants? Question number 2. When prevailing winds flow over the berm that surrounds the pit, airflow patterns will be disturbed, possibly creating a wake in and over the pit, which will affect pollutant transport and dispersion in unexpected ways. Has Vulcan modeled the aerodynamic flow patterns expected under the seasonal atmospheric conditions expected at Sahuarita? Number 3, how will Vulcan mitigate any odors emanating from their hot asphalt operations? Number 4, will the Vulcan establish an air quality monitoring program in affected neighborhoods? Number 5, how does Vulcan plan to prevent and contain any spills from fuel oil and storage tanks? Number 6, how does Vulcan currently handle flood water in the pit? If the flood water is contaminated with fuel oil in the future, how will they keep it from polluting the ground and the water table? And number 7, as severe storms and flash flooding become more frequent with the changing climate, how will Vulcan identify, store, treat, and dispose of possibly contaminated floodwater? Thank you for your time and your questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Dwayne Elser, and then after that, Rick Corrado.
Honorable Mayor, council members, and town staff. My name is Dwayne Elser, and I live in Sahuarita. My background is in engineering. I graduated from UCLA, and I worked for Hughes Aircraft Company for over 33 years. My positions at Hughes were systems engineer, technical director, program manager, and chief scientist. Two of the programs that I managed at Hughes developed remote chemical detection equipment. This equipment was used to detect carcinogens at oil refineries, to locate chemical weapons factories, crack houses, and of course, chemical nerve agents. On September 14th, I submitted a series of questions regarding the asphalt plant. These are, that I'm going to talk about, are a few of those questions. The Pima County PDEQ website states that the 10-micron particle emissions can travel up to 30 miles. They also say that the 2.5 micron emissions can travel hundreds of miles. The 2.5 micron emissions, they say, are made up of toxic compounds and heavy metals. These emissions can escape from the stack, the conveyor belts, the truck loading operation, and from the trucks. The PDEQ says that those 2.5 micron emissions can stay airborne for days and even weeks. So my question to you is, how does the council plan to protect the town and the pecan groves from those toxic substances? Next question. The proposed asphalt plant uses materials that are fire hazards. The fire code requires access at any time. How does the council plan to achieve this if cars, trucks, or trains can block the single entrance? When will the environmental impact report be available? Oops.
That's okay. I'm sure you'll be returning. We can continue
Okay.
that. And
All
you
right.
did mention you've submitted those already.
Yes,
Right.
I have.
Okay. And those will be addressed. Thank you. Rick Corrado and then Carl Larson.
Honorable Mayor Murphy, council members, town staff, my name is Rick Corrado. I live at 487 North Hale Drive. I'm in Sahuarita / Green Valley. I am a volunteer for Concerned Citizens of Sahuarita, otherwise known as CCS. A fellow volunteer by the name of Dwayne Elser has submitted the following questions to the town of Sahuarita by email on September the 14th of 2023. We ask these questions again now so that the residents assembled here tonight can hear them and know that they have been given ample consideration. We expect the town of Sahuarita, the mayor, the council, the town staff to make every effort, please, to provide answers to these questions. The EPA and the CDC have prepared lists of hazardous substances. The question being, number one, what are the hazardous substances shown in these lists which are planned to be used or produced in the proposed Vulcan hot mix asphalt plant? How many pounds maximum will be used or produced per day, per month, per year over the life of the plant? What maximum percentages of these substances can be expected to escape or to be released into the environment from the plant and from the transport vehicles? What is the maximum distance of dispersal for each of the airborne hazardous substances from the proposed asphalt plant and from the transport vehicles? Which hazardous substances will be released to the ground and the water table? We're always concerned about the water table and the aquifers. What effect will the monsoon rains have on the amounts of hazardous substances released to the ground and the water table? Where will the runoff containing the hazardous substances go? Will the hazardous substances affect the wildlife? Will the hazardous substances affect and leach into the aquifer? The PDEQ follows the regulations established by the ADEQ and the EPA. These regulations do not regulate odors, but the CDC and the ATSDR has found that odors do impact the quality of life and the health of many people. The odor detection thresholds are below the exposure limit set by the EPA and the Occupational Safety Hazard Association. How does the town of Sahuarita plan to protect the health of its citizens from the noxious odors of the proposed asphalt plant? The vehicles transporting the bitumen and the recycled oil fuel, which is some of the most hazardous material produced, to the proposed asphalt plants, will be traveling over Sahuarita roads. How does the Sahuarita Town Council plan to respond to potential catastrophic accidents involving these materials and these trucks? That pretty much concludes for now the substances that I wanted to bring before the council, and I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Carl Larson, and then Gail Baumgartner.
Honorable Mayor Murphy, council members, town staff, my name is Carl Larson. I spoke at the call of public meeting on March 27th and have been a taxpayer since 1999 in Quail Creek. I mentioned that I recreate and substitute teach in this region for many years and involved with the education of children for 44 years. I am now a volunteer for Concerned Citizens of Sahuarita, also known as CCS. A fellow CCS volunteer asked today that the following question be asked this evening and submitted to the town for public record. We expect the town of Sahuarita staff to make every effort to find and provide an answer to these questions. What does the Sahuarita Town Council think will happen to our homeowners insurance rates in Sahuarita when the fire risk goes up for homeowners' homes? Madeira Reserve is already in a wildlife zone that makes their insurance more costly. Has the Sahuarita Town Council considered or went as far as to model what will happen with the insurance rates of great number of their residents should they approve the Vulcan Cup? This leads to my question. Vulcan plans on using the smelly recycled oil to fuel their plant. May I add, when I was on the Marana plant tour in May, which Vulcan had kindly invited us QC members to go on, we asked them about how they plan on putting out a major fire. Should a train be blocking the tracks, which they would need major fire protection assistance. Vulcan, they actually asked a question with a question. They said, well, it was kind of very corporate-like. They said, how does QC put out a fire under the same scenario? I looked at it, Maggie and myself, we said, hey, we got a fire department on our side of the tracks. Do you? Then they gave me another question to answer the question, which was, well, what are the chances of this happening? They never really answered my question. The responses in case of a major fire greatly concerns me. I had actually 3 daycare centers for 26 years on the south side of Chicago. One of the biggest factors that, in order for me to be in business, was our fire protection of our children. I think we should at least consider what goes on. And I understand I might be getting a cart before the horse, and that will be looked at later, but this is something that we really need to address. The council needs to understand that this and fire insurance risks and costs, especially utilizing smelly recycled oil, produce asphalt in our minds, is on our minds and very concerning, and this does not add value, which I spoke about the last time I was here, and which the Aspire Town Vision Plan calls for. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Gail, and then Peter LaFerno.
Going down.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in a good mood today, see?
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Murphy, council members, and town staff, thank you for recognizing me. My name is Gail Baumgartner. I'm a volunteer for the Concerned Citizens of Sahuarita, CCS. I have questions to put before the council that I would like to have entered into the public record. These come from the reports that Nino and Moore, the consultants hired by the town but paid for by Vulcan, prepared. We expect the town, mayor, council, and town staff to make every effort to find and provide answers to these questions. 1. In their first report dated April 4th, 2023, it stated that Vulcan intends to do maintenance from the hours of 3:30 to 9:30 p.m. Why would Vulcan be allowed to operate with bright floodlights after dark when the rest of the area is bound by dark skies ordinances due to the observatory? 2. In their second report, dated July 11, 2023, Vulcan states average daily truck count to be 50 to 76 trucks per day, with potential night work already factored in. Vulcan is already on record stating that 225 trucks a day is more like what they're anticipating. So is this suggesting they're actually looking to do production potentially around the clock if needed? This would be totally unacceptable and contradicts everything they've claimed they would be doing for their daily working hours. So again, will you hold Vulcan to the dark skies ordinances? And if not, why not? 3, from the same report, Vulcan proposes to pave the access driveway and employee parking area to reduce dust within 180 days of the HMA production start date. Why does Vulcan need 6 months to do this? Town, we need to require this be done prior to production startup. 4, Nino and Moore found there are 2 PDEQ air monitors near the proposed HMA site, one approximately 3/4 of a mile southeast and one about 7 miles southwest. With the prevailing winds from the southeast, these will be insufficient to give a true reading. We feel that another 1 to 2 monitors need to be installed in a proper location to capture true readings of the majority of the wind patterns at Vulcan's expense as a condition should this cut be approved. Will you require this? And again, if not, why not? 5, Vulcan states the health hazards will not impact Quail Creek due to the prevailing winds coming from the southeast the majority of the time. However, 1, there is that smaller portion of the time where it will go directly into Quail Creek. This cannot be ignored. 2, it is also totally unacceptable to ignore the impact this will have on the areas in the direct path of the prevailing winds. Residents of Rancho Sahuarita, the schools, athletic fields, the pecan groves, and even the town hall itself. Every justification Vulcan and Nino and Moore gave to consider nothing a hazard to Quail Creek needs to be reevaluated, especially with regards to their impacts to the locations to the north and northwest. Will you, the town, demand that this be done? If not, why not? This concludes my questions for today. Thank you for your time and attention to these matters.
Thanks, Gail. Peter and then Linda Peterson.
Good evening to all. My name is Peter Laferno. I am a resident of Quail Creek, and I'm here to speak about asphalt odor. In my last presentation to this body, I reviewed the Centers for Disease Control literature documenting the health consequences caused solely by non-toxic nuisance odors. In this case, the non-toxic nuisance odor of asphalt. I am here tonight to explore a critical question. Will the environmental odor of asphalt penetrate Quail Creek? The town consultants help answer this question. There are many points of odor release at asphalt plants. According to many experts, truck loadout points are a large source of asphalt odor release. Your consultants, Nino and Moore, in their April 4th, 2023 report inform us, quote, trucks leaving the facility may create dust and odor nuisance complaints for many miles beyond the entrance and exit to the facility. In the same report, the consultants inform us that, quote, the most common complaints associated with asphalt plants in Maricopa County are odors, close quote. In addition, your consultants, Nino and Moore, in their August 7th, 2023 report, inform us that winds will be blowing from the Vulcan plant toward Quail Creek 19% of the time. That is on average every 5th day or 69 days per year. So let's put this all together. The senior citizen community of Quail Creek will on average get the odor of asphalt every 5th day or 69 days a year. On the days when the wind is blowing from Vulcan to Quail Creek, per the Centers for Disease Control, the odor will cause those of us with asthma or emphysema to feel worse. It will give us headaches, eye irritations, wheezing, coughing, nausea, etc., until the odor dissipates. We will have to check wind direction to see if we can go for a morning or evening walk. We will have to check wind direction to see if we need to cancel our golf tee time or cancel our pickleball or tennis match. Who wants to live this way? Does this town council want the residents of Quail Creek to live this way? Additionally, would anyone here purchase a home at Quail Creek if you were told you will smell asphalt on average every 5th day or 69 days a year? Your highest calling as public officials is to protect health and safety of your constituents. The health consequences of asphalt odor, supported by documentation from the Centers for Disease Control, give you the basis and documentation to deny this Vulcan application. If you are going to err, please err on the side of health. Do not gamble with the health of your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Peterson and then Linda Beal.
Mayor Murphy, Town Council, and Town Staff, I just decided about an hour ago that I would stand up and speak and wrote down some comments. I was very disturbed by the email that was sent out recently regarding the council informing us that the Vulcan Asphalt people will be providing the information on how the pollutants, particles, and so on will affect the air and general population. I can't believe that this would not be statistically skewed and self-serving. They are paying for it. They want this proposal to go through. Why? Of course they're going to want us to think that they will not only not probably have any damaging things, but if they do, they will take care of it with what, a fine, or Where is the investigation and presentation not being paid for by them? Why are they doing it? Why, as in an independent company, it appears that Pecan people are doing something, but why isn't the city and the zoning commission doing their own presentation and investigation? What if the fires that are possible at other hot mix asphalt companies that they have a history of, and the pollution that they have historically emitted, the history of the past and potential future damage to the health, traffic, damage to the roads, pollutants not only in our air, but in our ground and water. What is the collective damage to this valley? It's not just Quail Creek, it's this entire valley. From damaging particulates in the air from the current and future mines. They're going to ring in this valley with mines, as well as soil particles blown into the air from agricultural areas with no regulations, and then add a hot asphalt plant and what they're emitting. This is a collective issue. So instead of isolating this as just a hot asphalt plant, this is about all of these things coming together and is accumulating. What is the vision for this valley, I want to ask, and the well-being of the people here? Or is there even a vision that is for the well-being of the people and not for economic prosperity, which is written on the wall over there? Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Beal and then Penny Pestle.
Mayor Murphy, council members, staff. I'm Linda Beal. My address is 2423 East Blue Jay Bluff Lane in Quail Creek. I just got back from hiding from the summer heat and learned that my house taxes have gone up $300. I was appalled, because here I am wondering if I should even keep my house with the threat of the asphalt plant over my head. However, I had to stop and think. There's something that was bothering me lately. The numbers for the trucks keep changing all the time. When we visited Marana, there were conveyors carrying asphalt that had been removed from the roads. It was pointed out that they were sprinkling it with water to minimize the dust, but that it was going to be recycled into the asphalt recipe. There was a small unit by the towers that were loading the trucks, and it wasn't functioning that day. They said it was used for adding the recycled asphalt to the mix.
So, on the days they do add the recycled asphalt to the mix, are the fumes and odor worse than the fresh asphalt? I can't help but wonder. But my big question was, this big highway project is going to yield tons and tons of recyclable asphalt. Are they counting the trucks bringing that in, or don't they have to count those trucks? I just think we should be paying attention to what they have to count and what they don't. Some other thoughts that I would like to share. Over the summer, I heard that Vulcan donated thousands of dollars to light up the skies on the 4th of July. And I sure hope they don't think people enjoyed it so much that they're now welcome to fill our skies with pollution. I also wondered if they would write it off as an expense towards their CUP. In any case, the gesture did not pass my smell test. I also heard that Vulcan is providing an air study. Do you really think that that will be an unbiased and honest report? That isn't passing my smell test either. Have you thought about what you might do if they try to donate to you or your campaign? I believe Vulcan is using well-practiced methods, manipulation of information, creative interpretations, and selective data to put their operation in place. It maximizes their profit on the highway project at the expense of the people that you serve. My common sense tells me that the CUP should have been dismissed immediately. Reality shows that Vulcan will use all its resources and connections to place a cheap, dirty, oil-fueled collection of used equipment in the middle of a large residential development and pecan grove.
Thank you, Linda. Penny recognized her name.
I did. Good evening, Mayor Murphy, members of the council, staff. My name is Penny Pessel. I am board president of the Sahuarita Food Bank and Community Resource Center. I was here 2 weeks ago when a consent agenda was approved unanimously by this wonderful board, and included in that was $90,000 for the Sahuarita Food Bank and Community Resource Center. I had hoped to be able to thank you that night, but since public comment preceded the vote, that did not seem appropriate. So I am here tonight to thank you, to offer profound thanks for the support of the town. The grant, the contract, I should say, is for workforce development, for food, and for weekend nutrition backpacks for kiddos. And in each of those areas, we've had significant increase. In August, we thought things were beginning to even out or even fall a bit. In September, we had 1 week when we had 1,900 individuals fed by the food bank. The numbers are up. If we have a government shutdown, I can assure you there are going to be TSA agents and others who will be coming for food. In addition, our backpacks used to be 450, 500 a week. We are at 750 to 800 a week. One of the Sahuarita schools, Wrightson Ridge, had 200 kids who were eligible. We decided, because the population of the school is not much greater than that, that we would ensure that every kiddo got a backpack because it becomes awkward otherwise. Career training. We have seen a tremendous increase in the need for caregivers, for certified nurse assistants, for computer know-how. This is Cyber Security Week, computers, and for other technical skills. So we are very grateful for the support of that as well. So I just wanted to give you a little preview of the next months and the next year. We have begun a project that will involve rural assistance using a trailer, 46-foot trailer with a classroom and an office and food distribution, and that is pulled by a very large truck that's called Project Azul. We are also applying for a state status that will allow us to offer much more robust classes, a Google IT certificate, which is a national certificate, an augmented virtual reality welding program that uses only computers to teach welding, so it's portable. And that makes it possible to bring to various places in our community. We also have been extremely fortunate to get a grant from the First Things First organization that emphasizes children at 0 to 5 and their families. This will be bringing 5 different child providers to this community. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Penny. Appreciate it. That's all the speaker cards I have. Was there anybody else that wanted to address the council? Seeing no movement, I will declare the call to public closed. And once again, thank you for your very professional and respectful comments and abiding by the time. It really means a lot to myself and to the rest of the council. Thank you. Next, we come to council brief summary of current events. Councilmember Bracco.
Mayor Murphy, we attended the DAV charter ceremony. We now have a local Disabled American Veterans chapter for Serene and Green Valley area. And so that was recognized by the state.
Absolutely. I think it's 18,000 just in our mini area, not even the full congressional area. Thanks. Debbie? No? Diane? No? Steve? No? I just wanted to pass on my gratitude for the wonderful support of the recent State of the Town. And from Shane and his leadership, collaborative leadership, it was only the second time the police color guard has ever presented, and what a wonderful job the PD did on that. The Chamber, Desert Diamond Casino, the choir from Anza Trail, all of the town staff, Dustin and Haley and Jorge on tech support. The video, I had a lot of comments on the video that they would have thought it was professionally produced outside, and I was proud to say, no, that was our own staff putting that together, featuring those 4 individuals, 4 residents. So I was really pleased about that. So just thanks for all. Shane, if you can pass that on. Also, our reminder, October 23rd is our next regularly scheduled meeting. And with that, Madam Clerk, item number 8, please.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr.
Oh, I'm
Mayor?
sorry. I'm sorry.
Do you
See,
mind if-
I did. You and or Simon, please comment. Thanks, Kara.
That's okay. Normally, I'm totally okay with being silent during the online, but I wanted to share that I was given the opportunity to attend an Arbinger Institute training called Outward Performance. Companies that have utilized and incorporated this training include Raytheon, CenturyLink, Microsoft, Nestle, and actually a high percentage of police departments and correctional and prisons utilize this training that I was able to attend. I am now a licensed trainer for outward performance training and look forward to sharing the knowledge of having an outward mindset I gained from this training to town staff as deemed appropriate by the town manager. And I'm also happy to report that I received permission to invite a limited number of nonprofit and school community leaders to join in those training sessions. So I'm looking forward to bringing what I've learned to the town.
Thank you. Councilman Davis, did you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thanks. Apologies, I forgot the people in the air. Madam Clerk, now item number 8, please.
Town Manager's Report highlighting employee and department accomplishments, capital improvement projects, development projects, and town events.
Thank you. Mr. Dilly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's my privilege to present to you the September Manager's Report. I'm grateful for all the staff involvement, from leadership team to Mark Felix in the town manager's office helping to put this together. It really is a team effort. Next slide, please. We will kick this report off as we do others by focusing on our employees. During the period covered by this report, we brought on 3 new employees. Alex Magallanes Did I pronounce that right, Councilmember Magallanes? Okay, I think that's it, yes. Alex, I've met him a couple of times. He is new to our economic development team. That makes a full staff for Victor and his group. We welcome Alex. Jesus Maia is joining Public Works as a fleet technician, part of our pilot program to engage in our fleet division to take care of our own vehicles in-house. Really appreciate Jesus being a part of that team. Caitlin Well has come on with Parks and Rec as a recreational generalist. And then we also recognize some milestones in our organization. Focusing on the 5-year, we've got 4 that we are recognizing. Paul Burton has celebrated his 5th year with the town. I'm grateful for all that he does for the town. Jillian Gwaltney is a police officer, 5 years with the town. Sean Mastropole is a corporal in the police department. And Edward Valdez is also a police officer in our PD. I'm grateful to have their service to our community. Celebrating 15 years, Christina Pelajo, and she's a police officer. She was hired on September 2nd, 2008. Really appreciate Christina's dedication to our police department and to our community. Next slide. We also like to acknowledge accomplishments by our employees. Mayor and councils tonight will do so with 2 employees. Ana Bustos in our police department is being recognized for a real dedication to our community. Since 2019, she's been spearheading the blood drives for the police department. Over that course of time, over 288 people have donated blood, 29 of which were first-time donors, totaling 295 units of blood. Those in this industry say that with that kind of outcome, 295 units of blood, that we've potentially saved 725 lives. I want to thank Anna and her continued efforts and all that have participated in these drives. It makes a difference. In Public Works, we recognize David Orchides, who successfully passed his core exam with pesticide and herbicide certification. David is currently in the process of obtaining his certification with the Arizona Department of Agriculture to help in our right-of-way abatement of weeds. Next slide. We'll get into major department highlights. We'll start. Want to acknowledge that we were able to celebrate. Celebrations are always good in our community. We celebrated a new piece of art that has gained in notoriety and popularity. The Sarita letters on the corner of Starlight View and Lane and Sarita Road. We had a ribbon cutting where we were joined by our partners, the Unified School District, Sarita Unified School District, and PAG. And then the young artist and the art teacher from the TABI program came out to celebrate the unveiling of this new piece of art for our community. Often see people out there taking pictures, at least I have, and I think it's a great add to our community. In the Department of Law, Jocelyn Enriquez is a legal assistant, and Barbara Jackson, criminal paralegal. They were able to attend a national conference in Houston for legal support professionals. It was a great experience for them. They were able to network and rub shoulders with their peers across the country. And I spoke to them personally about their experience, and they just really, really appreciated the town's support and allowing them to be exposed to that type of opportunity. In Public Works, John Garcia, senior engineering technician, is one of the finalists for the 2023 ONA Award. The ONA Award winner will be announced at the 2023 Arizona Creative Excellence Award held later in October 19th in Phoenix. Everybody knows John. John's been a part of, involved in or had his fingerprints on so many different projects in our community. The art project we just talked about, other projects, other art projects in the community that, he's been a part of, Mayor.
The flag placement program.
Flag placement program. He's
road
often
cleanup.
He's often out there beautifying our right of way and just doing whatever he needs to do. And he's just he loves working with youth and being engaged. He's being recognized and potentially he's definitely in the running for this award and with good reason. Also in Public Works, we welcome Jesus Maya. He's I already mentioned him as a new employee, but this is a really important project for our community in terms of saving dollars and being more efficient in protecting the tools in our fleet. So thanks again for supporting that new program in the Public Works Department, Mayor and Council. We do a huge shout out in building safety for their efforts, recent efforts in the aftermath of the fire at Walmart. Just want to recognize Heather Diaz and Alan Parkin, particularly safety employees. Walmart was in a tough spot, and really the community came together with the health department, the Green Valley Fire Department, and our building safety folks to help them through that. And believe it or not, after the fire, 5 days later, they're in business again. Yep. And so that's a really big, huge accolades and a shout out for everybody involved. And on our team, that's Heather Diaz and Alan Parkin. We also like to recognize the fact that Alea Bronze, one of our assistant planners who was able to attend 2023 American Planning Association Chapter Conference here in Arizona. This really it's the largest planning conference in the state, and it usually draws several hundred planners from all over the state to come together and talk about best practices. Alea was allowed to be a part of that process, and we're grateful for the support, Mayor and Council. In finance, want to recognize Ron Bishop, our technology manager. We heard from him earlier today. He attended the 20th annual joint meeting of the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, more than 1,000 people from across the United States attended, including federal, state, and local government professionals, to talk about cybersecurity and what we need to do in this day and age to protect ourselves and the critical information that helps keep the cogs of government moving forward. Next slide. In Parks and Rec, Parks and Rec reported on putting out another successful event, the Barkerama, on Wednesday, September 13th. I don't know if, Mayor, you were able to attend that.
No, I wasn't that day. I was out of town.
I didn't get there with my dog either, but it was well attended, and I heard only good things about it. In September, Park staff will also begin the process of renovating restrooms, if they haven't already, restrooms in the Sahuarita Lake Park, both the north restroom and the south restroom. That renovation will involve stucco repair, recoat of the roofs with sealant, replace outdated or malfunctioning interior fixtures, partitions, and lighting. So it'll be a big renovation there, and hopefully well received by the community that uses them. The next signature event is coming up. It's the Spooktacular on Friday, October 27th, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. here at Town Hall. Event planning is underway, and trunk or treat registration has now opened. For economic development, the team welcomes Alex again as a new member of the team. Alex will be primarily responsible for the Grow in Sahuarita program, which is designed to assist aspiring entrepreneurs and startup companies. We're grateful to have him. He's proud to call. He and his family are proud to call Sahuarita home, and he's got extensive experience with public outreach. He was also affiliated with the Chicano Por La Causa team and their work in the region. Also, the town of Sahuarita was highlighted as a community partner at the ASBIDCon 23 Small Business Expo recently. Also, we had Congressman Juan Ciscomani, who visited the Campbell Avenue Extension site as a result of prioritizing $3 million for this project that has yet to go through and complete the federal process. But the work of Congressman Ciscomani is huge in moving that thing forward as a member of the Appropriations Committee. And also the town of Sahuarita was recently featured in the Tucson.com article about the origins of the name Sahuarita. I read that article, thought that was fun to learn a little bit about the history. Want to do a shout out for those who put that together. Next slide. And by way of capital improvement, Mayor and Council want to just reiterate the encouraging outcomes of the ACC efforts on the railroad improvements there at the Quail Creek Crossing or extension project. We're looking at a 6 to 9 month time frame to have a deliverable there, and those that intersection signal energized and working as everybody would expect it to be working. We also want to acknowledge a revised timeline on the Vulcan CUP. The Vulcan itself is working on the air quality study that they were requested to perform. We know that they've indicated that they don't see that being completed until late October, first part of November. Our own consultant is going to need 4 to 5 weeks to critique that study and provide a report back to us. And when you pencil things out, that puts us dead smack in the into December and well into the holidays. And so it was decided that we would push the public hearing options into the first of the calendar year, into January. So I just wanted to make a report on that, make sure everybody was clear on the timeline. Mayor and Council, next slide, please. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks. Kara or Simon, any questions from the presentation?
None from me.
Thanks.
No, I'm good.
Bill, anybody? Questions to my left? No? Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it. Item number 9 is the consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
So moved.
All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, item number 10.
Public hearing, discussion, and possible adoption of ordinance number 2023-167, amending Title 18 zoning by amending Chapter 18.03 General Definitions, Section 18.03020 Definitions, by amending Chapter 1807 General Regulations and Exceptions, Sections 1807-030 Land Use Regulations and 1807-040 Land Use Exceptions, by amending Chapter 1809 General Residential and Rural Zoning Provisions, and by repealing in its entirety Sections 18.11 TH Trailer Home Site Zone, 18.13 RH Rural Homestead Zone, 18.14 GR1 Rural Residential Zone, 18.17 SR Suburban Ranch Zone, 18.18 SR2 Suburban Ranch Zone, 18.19 SH Suburban Homestead Zone, 18.21 R1 Single Residence Zone, 18.23 R2 Single Residence Zone, 18.25 R3 Single Residence Zone, 18.27 R4 Mixed Dwelling Type Zone, 18.29 R5 Multiple Residence Zone, 18.33 MH1 Zone Manufactured and Mobile Home 1 Zone, and 18.35 MH2 Manufactured and Mobile Home 2 Zone, and marking the foregoing sections as reserved, and amended by adding Chapter 18.12 Rural and Residential Zones, Sections 18.12010 Purpose, 18.12020 Table of Permitted Uses, 18.12030 Performance Standards, and 18.12040 Development Standards, declaring the document entitled The Town of Sahuarita Title 18 Zoning Code Amendments dated September 2023 as a public record, adopting the Town of Sahuarita Title 18 Zoning Code Amendments dated Sep 2023 by reference Sahuarita Resolution Number 2023-0757, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, providing for penalties, and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Lisa, I was a little distracted. Could you repeat that, please?
Can you say that again?
Yeah. I just think she does a great job.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anna Cassidy, our Planning and Building Director, who you met earlier, will introduce the item, and then Dylan Perry, one of our senior planners, will present the item. Anna.
Thank you, Mayor Murphy, members of the council. This item is more commonly referred to as our Residential Zones Code Amendment. I will have Dylan Perry presenting the amendment. He's been the case planner on it. It's been a heavy lift for him, and he's done a great job.
Thank you, Dylan. Good evening, Dylan. Please present.
Good evening, Mayor Murphy, members of the council. This is a public hearing for the Residential Zones Code Text Amendment. I wanted to start by giving a little background on the project. So when the town was incorporated in 1994, the zoning code was adopted from Pima County. And because of that, and the fact that the residential zone section has not changed much since then, it is outdated, it is difficult to use, and it's not reflective of the suburban nature of the town of Sahuarita. It's more designed for a more rural county. Staff had three main goals with this amendment. First was to simplify the residential zones for the user. The second was to better make sure that the residential zones better reflected the suburban nature of the town of Sahuarita, and to provide for newer trends in residential development. That came out of a workforce housing study that was done by the town in 2020. We started our industry outreach in August of 2022. We did presentations before the Better Together Committee, the Metropolitan Pima Alliance, and the Southern Arizona Homebuilders Association. We established a project page on the Planning and Building website. We also shared a draft of the amendment with the development community, and information on the amendment was provided in the Metropolitan Pima Alliance newsletter. We held our first study session before the town council on September 26th of last year. That study session helped to kick off the public engagement process of this amendment. And so following that, we had public meetings. We had a virtual one on October 11th, followed by an in-person meeting on October 19th. We also held 4 pop-up meetings at local parks. We had 3 at Animex Park and 1 at Park Los Arroyos, and we held those between November and December of last year. We attended Winterfest as part of the information booth and handed out cards on the project to residents who approached the booth. We've had 2 study sessions this year, one on February 27th and one on April 10th. The February 27th meeting is where we presented the changes that we'd made based on the feedback that we received during the public and industry outreach. And then the April 10th meeting is where we made some additional changes based on the feedback that we received from council at the February 27th meeting. We then went back before the Southern Arizona Homebuilders Association Technical Committee meeting and presented the changes that we had made since we initially presented to them last August, and we did that in May of this year. As far as the results of the outreach process, we initially started with those virtual and in-person meetings, and they were not well attended, so we switched to the try and pop-up meetings, and we found those to be well attended. Also, Winterfest allowed us to reach a large audience with the residents that approached the information booth there. We found people to generally be supportive of the amendment. There were a few areas of concern that were brought up by the public. A large portion of that had to do with tiny homes on wheels, and then tiny home communities, and that was basically an aesthetics concern that was shared by the public. And then there was an additional concern about that ADUs, adding those in would potentially increase parking issues in areas that already had some parking issues. So I'm going to go through each of those goals that staff had and explain what we did to address those, starting with the simplification of the code. Here we took the 13 chapters of the residential zone section and reduced it down to 1 chapter. And in doing that, it allowed us to create 1 table of uses. That table of uses, for the users, instead of having to go to each individual chapter to find out where something is permitted, they can now just go to that 1 table. We also eliminated some unused zones. That was the SR2, MH1, and MH2 zones. These were zones that were in the zoning code, but there was no land in the town with that zoning designation. We also created a new MH zone, and that's basically replacing the existing TH zone. So it's a manufactured housing zone replacing the trailer home site zone. And that is just, we're doing that just because it better describes what's allowed in that zone. We also created development standards tables for main buildings, multifamily structures, and accessory structures. These are the tables where you find the minimum lot sizes, maximum building heights, and the setback information. We created a uniform standard for lot coverage for accessory structures, and this was done because in the code, depending on your zone, there were different requirements for figuring out what the lot coverage standard was. And so now we're going with just a percentage of the overall lot size. So it'll be easier for a homeowner to be able to figure out what they're allowed to do with their lot. We also replaced guest houses, rear dwellings, and secondary dwellings with accessory dwelling units, and I'll discuss that as I get to the third goal of this amendment. The second goal here was to make sure the residential zones better reflect the nature of the town of Sahuarita. And as we said before, since this was adopted from a county code, there are some uses in there that are better suited for more rural areas. We are eliminating those such as hog ranches, animal racetracks, airstrips, and commercial feedlots. And I did just want to mention here real quick that this does not impact 4-H animals, which was something that was brought up. These are more of your commercial animal lots, such as the hog ranches. The third goal of our amendment was to allow for newer trends in residential development. And as I mentioned before, it came out of a housing study that was done in 2020 that identified a need to increase workforce housing in the town. A housing strategy was developed in 2021, and it identified certain trends, and those included accessory dwelling units, single-family build for rent, tiny homes, and small lot subdivisions. So I'm going to go through each of those trends and explain what we've done with those in the amendment, starting with the accessory dwelling unit. In our current code, there's 3 types of accessory dwellings. You have your secondary dwelling, your rear dwelling, and your guest house. In our new code, we're proposing to replace all of those with accessory dwelling unit. So what we propose for ADUs is that they will be allowed in any residential zone with a minimum, where the lot has a minimum lot size of 11,000 square feet. The ADU will be restricted to a maximum of 1,000 square feet. It'll be allowed to have a full kitchen. It will require 1 parking space. However, that parking space can be on site if they have room for that in the existing driveway. Our code requires 2 parking spaces for a house. So if you can fit both of them in the in the garage, then you'd have a space on the driveway for this. If you cannot fit it on the driveway, if there is legal parking on both sides of the street, you will be allowed to use the street frontage for parking. And if you cannot do either of those, then you would have to add an additional parking space on site. As far as the height requirement, what we've done is it's sort of a step down approach. If the ADU meets the main house setbacks, it'll be allowed to have the same maximum height requirement as the main house. If that ADU or a portion of that ADU extends past the main house setback but is within the ADU setback, it would have a maximum height of 16 feet. So how does that compare with what we have in that current code? In our current code, we've gone, on here we put guest houses because that's the most commonly used option that's in our current code. And those were allowed in any residential zone with a lot size larger than 16,000 square feet. So we've reduced the lot size where it's allowed by 5,000 square feet. We are allowing a full kitchen, which was not allowed before. It's still limited to 1 per lot. And then the setback requirements have also changed, and they were more stringent in the existing code than what it will be now. How we've handled the setbacks is we've kind of, for the most part, the setback is in between the main house setbacks and what is allowed for accessory structures. Accessory structures would be your sheds, your lattices, pergolas, those type of uses. The only case where that doesn't apply is in the RH and SR, which are your larger lots, like your 3-acre lots. So there we didn't deem it necessary to go as close to the property line for an accessory dwelling unit. In the other ones you'll see in the GR1, R1, R2 through R5, you'll notice that the proposed ADU setback falls somewhere between the main house setback and the accessory structure setback. So this slide just provides an example of what an attached ADU could look like on an approximately 11,000 square foot lot. And then this is an example of a detached ADU on that same 11,000 square foot lot. The second trend we looked at was that of the single family build for rent communities. Again, these are basically 1 lot with single family homes on it. And in order to allow this, we just had to change the multifamily definition to allow multiple single family homes on 1 lot. So this would be handled very similar to an apartment complex. And since this has come up a number of times as to what the difference is between this and condos and townhomes, we wanted to just make it clear that the single family for rent is not subdivided and is under single ownership, while condos and townhomes are typically subdivided and under separate ownership. The third one of these trends was the providing rules for tiny homes. So this slide just provides an example of what some tiny homes in Arizona do look like. Two of these examples are ones in the Tucson area, the ones in the center and the one on the left side of the slide here. So as I mentioned before, tiny homes was one of the things that the public did have the most feedback on. So when we went back in and made some changes to it, we ended up settling on allowing tiny homes on wheels which are not attached to a foundation and either ground set or skirted to only be permitted in the manufactured housing zone, which also allows for RV parks. Where the tiny homes on wheels are attached to a foundation and either ground set or skirted, they are permitted in the larger lot zones where manufactured homes can go. And then the stick-built tiny homes are permitted in any residential zone as a main house. And finally, the last trend was that of the small lot detached home subdivisions. And these are small lots, they're single family homes on very small lots. And what we've done here to allow this is we just reduced the minimum lot size for single detached units in our multifamily zones, the R4 and the R5 zones, to be the same as what's already allowed for duplex or multifamily homes in those zones. So it's not increasing the density, it's just allowing the single family homes to be built at the same density as the multifamily. So where does the amendment apply? It does not apply in the Rancho Cerrita community. It only applies in other specific planned communities where the specific plan is silent or referred back to the current zoning code. It would apply in all other areas of the town with the caveat that if there are CC&Rs or if they have an HOA, these may restrict some of these. I did take a look at the lots in the town that I know for certain are not in an HOA and would fall within this, and there's approximately 500 lots that it would apply to that are outside of HOA communities, and then obviously in some of those HOA communities it might apply as well.
Dylan, when it comes to CC&Rs and zoning, which one takes precedence once somebody's already bought into a HOA? Can the CC&R prevent these from happening? That's what I was guessing, but I just wanted to make sure I was correct.
Yeah, Mayor Murphy, members of the council, it would be the one that is more stringent that would apply.
Okay, so if they already bought into an area with CC&Rs that didn't allow this, that's what rules the day.
That is correct.
Thank you.
So this map provides an example of, what I ended up doing is having to split the town in half, so the left has the north side of the town, the right has the south end of the town, and shows you the green areas are those areas that this amendment would apply in. As I said before, some of those are HOA communities, though, that would restrict that. But you can see there's a large portion of it that falls on the west and east side of La Cañada from El Toro down to Duval Mine.
Dylan, I get the left side. I guess I'm a little confused. Can you just point out, what's on the right-hand side of the screen, the left side of, I guess it's I-19, is that, so that's Old Nogales is coming, sweeping down like that? Right. So what's that big green open area that has nothing in it on the, below Duval Mine Road? Is that the state land?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer, but.
I don't know if it'll work on the screen.
Oh, okay. Oh, did not mean to do that, sorry.
So yeah, just.
Okay, you're talking about in here?
Yeah, what's that?
So that is the area, yeah, some of that is some of that is the state land area. So
Okay.
it's where, that's actually where the Quail Crossing extension, a portion of that is where that comes up and goes over and connects next to the crossing.
The county's wastewater treatment plant is in that area as
Right.
well.
So the port, right to the right, that's Quail Creek, right to the right of the cursor?
Right here is Quail Creek.
So that does not apply because of CC&Rs in Quail Creek?
Mayor Murphy, members of the council, it doesn't apply in Quail Creek because of the specific plan.
Of the specific plan, right. Okay.
So So this amendment does help support policies of the general plan. We have land use policy 4.1 and 4.3, and these have to do with encouraging a wide range of housing types and also with making the development compatible with existing land uses and with promoting the character of the town. It also helps implement strategies for that from the housing strategy, and those included allowing single-family for rent development, the small lot detached homes, including specific standards for tiny homes, and reducing restrictions on accessory dwelling units. So staff recommends approval of the code amendment, and the reason for that recommendation is it is supported by the general plan policies. It does help implement several housing strategy action items, and it did address the staff's 3 goals that they had for this amendment. The Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on September 7th. The Planning and Zoning Commission voted 4-0 in favor of forwarding a recommendation of approval of the text amendment as written by staff. So we have a recommended motion up there, and that concludes my staff report.
Thanks. I know a lot of hard work and lots of hours went into it, so I really appreciate that. Before I open the public hearing, did any of the council members want to ask questions on it first? Well, because I can come back to it. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. If anybody would like to address the council on this particular issue, this would be the time. Yes. If you could just submit another card, you don't have to type it up, but it just...
I would just like to understand, does the existing 18.01.030 go away and it is replaced by new code?
Portions of the code are going away. Certain ones like 18.09 and 18.07 are having certain changes, but there are a number of sections, each of the individual sections for R1, R2, all of the different land use, their zoning designations will go away and be replaced by 18.12.
Answer the question?
No, I don't understand whether 18.01.030 goes away or not. Sorry,
that's okay.
There's something in there.
That's why we have a public hearing.
Mayor Murphy, members of the council, this amendment is not affecting chapter 18.01.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to ask a question? No? I'll declare the public hearing closed, and at this time entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Move to adopt ordinance 2023-167 and resolution 2023-0757 as presented by staff.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any, oh,
Can we do those one at a time? The resolution as a separate vote and then the ordinance?
No. Any other questions?
Okay.
All right, so we'll move to adopt ordinance 2023-167.
You second that? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
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 And we, any nays? And it passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay.
Councilman Greco?
Mr. Mayor, I'd
Yes.
like to adopt resolution 2023-0757 as presented by staff.
I second it.
Second. Are there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Passes unanimously. Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work on this. Madam Clerk, item number 11, please.
Discussion and possible adoption of ordinance number 2023-166, amending the Sahuarita Town Code, Title 10, Traffic Code, by amending Chapter 10.10, Traffic Control, by adding Section 10.10.180, prohibited crossing related to pedestrians crossing or stopping in the roadway, providing for the repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, providing for penalties, and establishing an effective date.
Thank you. Chief Nolan, our Chief of Police, will be presenting this item. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, and members of the council, I get an opportunity to talk to you about this median pedestrian ordinance, and I'm going to hope I do the clicker correctly. There we go. So with that, the primary goal behind this for me is safety. I'm looking for this ordinance to be passed by this council if they so choose. Our medians are not pedestrian friendly. They're not designed to be walked on, whether they're painted or they are raised. Some of these medians have cacti, plants, trees, some that are not user-friendly. If you run into them, walk into them, stumble upon them. Some of our medians clearly are uneven, etc. And it is not the norm where somebody's expecting somebody to step off from or step out of, sometimes perhaps blocking views, etc. You cannot control everybody where they stand, and that's not the argument I'm trying to make at all. I am trying to provide an option that will get medians, make medians a little bit safer. So this ordinance allows for people to cross the roadway if they're not able to cross it on that first travel, that first cycle of a light or opportunity when traffic is clear. It still allows them to stay in the middle at the crosswalk area where a crosswalk would normally be painted on the ground, etc., and then pass when the next reasonable opportunity comes forward. I use the term reasonable, and that there's the letter of the law, and then there's the intent of the law. And this is true of just about everything that is enforced by law enforcement. So I think we heard comments earlier about the smell test, and it'd be like stopping somebody for 3 miles an hour over the speed limit, going 28 and a 25, and the weather is normal, traffic is normal, and getting a ticket for speeding. That's not reasonable from my perspective. So realistically, what this will do is give an opportunity for somebody, the first time they violate it, is to receive a warning by an officer. The second time, if they're going to stick around and do the same thing, they could get a civil ticket, what I think of as an infraction, a fine ticket. And the third time, if they're not going along with obeying that law, that section can actually be enforced as a misdemeanor. Our goal would be education. I think the council has heard me numerous times about my goal is compliance, not the number of tickets officers write or anything like that. So with that, it allows for these raised medians to have people not waiting on them, walking up and down them, etc. Still allows for, because you'll see some signage here in a minute, about panhandling and things of that nature. It's really not an anti-panhandling ordinance. That would be inappropriate, that's illegal. What it does emphasize is getting them off of center medians. From my perspective, I look at this and I think of safety, and where people normally think people traversing a roadway, they come from the left side or the right side, as opposed to pop out from behind trees or cactus, etc., and then try to rush across the street. I think in your package you've got some statistical information about the number of collisions, pedestrian collisions here in Pima County, and obviously we're part of that. These bullet points emphasize, from my perspective, the safety aspect of it. It still allows people to sign out there with signage, requests, etc., from sidewalks, corners, and things of that nature. As I continue here, examples of some signage that would be allowed. You've got the signs up there right now, red borders and 18-inch tall, 12 inches wide, advising people to evaluate whether they want to give money to panhandlers or perhaps donate to their charity or their cause that might be able to utilize funding a little bit differently. So this is the type of stuff. When I was down at La Cholla in the Tucson area, La Cholla in Orange Grove, they have similar signage. They picked the color blue, but they have similar signage. So we're not the first to do this. My guess is we won't be the last if you so choose to pass this ordinance. But this is some information that'll help educate the public. And then here is the actual law enforcement sign, black and white. It's like the 55, 75 speed limit. They're black and white. This one references the code, and this one will be a little bit smaller, but placed on certain areas or medians, advising people that they can't sit there and simply remain there. They've got to traverse the roadway. Additionally, you've got, if this is passed, we'll need an amount of time to work with Public Works, et cetera, for installing signage, having that either purchased or produced here to put in the correct locations. My recommendation is that we have some type of effort on multiple town web pages to put information out to make people aware of this new ordinance, sort of that education first approach. And then we can utilize part of that time to help educate officers on how to properly enforce this. So this is not a 0 to 60 race. This is, I think, a methodical way of putting something into effect that keeps pedestrian off of center medians. I believe that closes my presentation unless you have questions of me.
No, thank you. So it would be a lot, oh, go ahead. Make sure you turn the mic on.
Yeah.
Yep.
I got it on. Chief Nolan, does this apply to the wonderful cleanup crew volunteers that we have in our town for cleaning up, being on the medians to clean up litter?
No. So from my perspective, I had part of this conversation with our attorney before the meeting. If you want to read the letter of the law on anything, you can find where it could theoretically be enforced without or beyond the intent of the law. So I would enact a policy on how this is supposed to be applied. So people cleaning up, picking up, et cetera, they're out there picking up debris, that type of thing. If you watch I think we still have some AAA and Santa Rita landscaping as well. They sometimes park on our sidewalks. Well, that's technically a violation, but that's not enforced. It's not somebody parking and walking away going into McDonald's. They're actually doing work there, and they have either vests on, and they have amber lights, that type of stuff. So that goes back to the reasonable rule, and if I have somebody enforcing in that area, I've hired the wrong person.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going to ask something similar because, I don't like weeds in our median. So if the mayor happened to be in a median pulling some weeds, which I have done before, I will not get arrested?
I have helped, John Garcia was mentioned earlier. No, you will not be, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you.
But
I appreciate
John
it.
Garcia was mentioned earlier. I see the man out there all the time working. Now, he's got the truck with the yellow lights, but occasionally a branch will grow out and you will see me out there trying to take care of the branch so it doesn't interfere with the travel of a car.
Okay.
So
We better up our spraying. I don't want me getting arrested out there, so I appreciate that. Bill, did you have a comment?
Nope.
Nope.
I just wanted to see if he'd make an exception.
Make
for
a
you.
step and
Yeah.
arrest me? Okay. He may actually take that to heart. I'm not so sure about that. Any other questions? No? At this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Move to adopt ordinance number 2023-166.
Do we have a second? Second? We have a motion and a second. Oh, I'm sorry. Kara or Simon, did you have any questions of the chief?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second. So no further discussion. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Please don't take Bill's comments to heart with me cleaning up. Next is item number 12, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, just for the record,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Egbert had to step off of the call.
Okay.
She may return if permitted, but I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm sure that'll be noted by our fantastic town clerk's office, correct? Item number 12.
Approval of a budget amendment transferring $40,000 out of the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Vehicle Replacements Capital Project, Project XXK04, and $20,000 out of the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services New Vehicle Acquisitions Capital Project 24K02 to the Police Department New Vehicle Acquisitions Capital Project 24PD1.
Thank you, and Mr. Stalder, our Parks and Rec Community Services Director, will present, and it sounds like looks like we're going to do a little joint presentation. So good evening, Devin, and please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for letting us present tonight. We're excited to share this collaborative effort between PRCS and SPD. I have a partner in crime, if that's appropriate here, with me today, and we're excited to solve these fleet challenges with you tonight. So we were trying to best demonstrate what had happened and transpired over the last several weeks between PD and PRCS, and we took a stab at this by trying to really divide two things that had happened, one in PRCS, one in SPD, that kind of collaborated into a solution. So the best way we thought that we could share that was showing a distinct line between the two departments. On the left side, we have Parks, Recreation, Community Services. On the right, we have Sahuarita Police Department. Both sides have challenges, and we have resources, and unfortunately, those resources aren't quite adequate to solve our individual problems. On the PRCS side, our current challenges are limited number of vehicles available for staff use. We have a significant number of staff who are sharing vehicles or are just having to wait because there's not vehicles available because they're in use. And what we found through our CIP this year and trying to find vehicles is that there's an increase in vehicle costs, which has decreased the number of vehicles feasible for our department to purchase. Currently, our department does have some resources available, and our two resources that we're sharing today is through our CIP account XXKO4 for vehicle replacements. This is really vehicle dollars for replacing vehicles that are aging out. What we found is that we still have really healthy life in the vehicles in our inventory, so we're not really interested in pursuing that currently. And then that second piece is our CIP account 24KO2 for new vehicle acquisitions. And going back to that cost, we have about $90,000 in that budget right now. We were anticipating 3 vehicles. We just got some quotes in today. We're looking at $60,000 for a single truck. So the dollars are not going as far as we had anticipated. So I'll hand over the mic to our chief.
Thank you, Devin. So the PD challenges, I think the council is somewhat familiar with already from some of your earlier actions and adjustments to budget. Locating and purchasing and then building out a police vehicle now is much more complex than it was 6 months ago or a year ago, and quite frankly, 3 months ago. I have Commander Allred that does this now. I did it in my prior career, and I handed it over to him, and this sometimes is a 20 to 30 hour a week job tracking stuff down. So part of it is the locating what's available, then actually getting it purchased before somebody else buys it out from under us, and then the building out of the vehicles. They're all 3 separate challenges. Costs, inventory, delivery on build out, and we're talking all types of equipment. The cage apparatus, the MDC apparatus, the computer in the car, that type of stuff. These all change on a weekly basis. And they sometimes change on whether or not somebody has enough employees to work with us to get enough vehicles out in a certain time period. And then our third challenge is the buses that we purchased out of our last fiscal year. Thank you, council, for supporting that. They're halfway built out, meaning the outside shell, it looks great. They're empty on the inside. And so we are looking for some type of funding to do that. To take that on and be able to utilize them sooner. So I believe that expresses the 3 primary challenges the PD is doing. Some of those are multi-phased, though.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council. So we caught wind that SPD was going through recycling of vehicles. And that's when we broached the conversation of, can we get some of those to solve our challenges in PRCS? And then Chief came back with, can we potentially help with some of their challenges? So the 6 vehicles, that SPD has that we're really interested in are 2 Chevy Tahoes, 1 Ford Fusion, 2 Ford F-150s, and a Dodge Caravan. These vehicles, when we talk about them in an emergency response situation, are end of life, but for the purposes of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services, still have plenty of life left in them. So we started chatting, and I worked my AC presentation magic and put some graphics in here. By transferring our resources, we do believe that our challenges will be solved. So by PD moving vehicles over to PRCS, we think that our challenges in vehicles will be solved. And by PRCS transferring some of these funds that now are not going to stretch the extra mile to get vehicles, we could help SPD in meeting their challenges for these vehicle build-outs. Any questions?
Nope, not
Okay.
yet.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I understand what you guys are trying to do, but my only caution is we need to keep track of the maintenance. These things reach end of life for a reason. If it becomes too much to keep them going and rolling, that's something we need to track and see if this works for future.
Yeah, Councilman Bracco through Mayor. We've already inherited one vehicle from PD in the last year. We found that, and correct me if I'm wrong, about 100,000 miles is where PD is transitioning their vehicles end of life. We're seeing in PRCS about 125 to 150,000 miles for useful life. So these vehicles are really going to play a good benefit to our department. So, yeah.
And to that point also, probably the miles, I mean, the PD vehicles are on the road sort of 24/7, right? The parks vehicles, it's more time to time, issue to issue, those types of things, and probably a lot less critical, I guess you would say.
Correct. So just as you're saying, Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Bracco, those points are clear to us. The way a police vehicle is driven, the idle time, et cetera, the amount of time out in the sun, the 24/7 lifespan, et cetera, the expectation is somewhere about the 100,000 mile mark, you're pretty much done. And that it's commonly counterproductive to maintenance, and what we're finding for something that is driven from point A to point B, not at excessive speeds, excessive braking, you can get that 125, sometimes 150,000 mile lifespan from them. So,
And Bill, when we work with staff too, because we're looking at the pilot maintenance program, that's probably something that they can weave in, as they're tracking it, because they're going to already be tracking it to see how that pilot program works as well. Absolutely. But good point. Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so kind of outlining some of these benefits of this proposed solution. These 6 vehicle assets proposed to be transferred from SPD to PRCS would solve the short-term constraints we're feeling with our staff. Although we anticipate new vehicles in the future through our CIP planning, the need currently exists with the number of staff, and this transfer would offer a solution in the short term. We also, again, what we discussed, we believe these vehicles have an estimated life of 3 to 5 years if they were to serve in PRCS. And for these last ones, I'm going to hand it back to Chief.
thank you. See if I can do it without my glasses. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to read down. I apologize. So the police department would have the capacity to outfit the 2 buses that are sitting right now. And for those that might not be aware, the 2 buses are, one is for our detective group that they work out of on more significant incidents, and the other one is for our CSI or CSS, crime scene specialists, crime scene investigations, where they are able to store, charge, utilize all their equipment from one location. We do have those incidents where they go out and they are working 20 hours straight. So these are important vehicles for us. They're utilized. The good news is not utilized with a whole lot of frequency, which is why we're able to buy the used buses.
Right.
So,
And would that help with the chain of custody from a CSI perspective, that they'll be outfitted, so if you have to store it while you're continuing the investigation before you go back, that would be
correct.
one of the uses as well.
This bus, as you just talked about, as the CSI or the detective bus, detectives can actually sit in the vehicle, look at the pictures that have been taken before they relinquish the scene. They can look at video before they relinquish the scene. They can package and store evidence inside the bus in secure areas.
Right.
Then go back into the scene, deal with stuff. And so these are significant pluses for them. The why now, the opportunity comes forward to move vehicles from one department to another. And otherwise, these would typically be auctioned off, and those are bargains for the people that are buying them. They're going to use them for a certain type of driving. But here, I believe we're actually being more, through this collaboration, more fiscally responsible, getting maximum dollar use from these vehicles. So I think that presents mine.
Appreciate it. Any questions why they're up there? Yes, Steve.
I really like the collaboration between the departments. I think it's neat to look outside of the silo and find something that benefits both departments. So well done there.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks. Any other questions? No. At this time, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Move to approve the budget amendment transferring $40,000 out of Parks and Recreation Community Services Vehicle Replacement Capital Project XXK04 and $20,000 out of Parks and Recreation Community Services New Vehicle Acquisition Capital Project 24K02 to the Police Department New Vehicle Acquisition Capital Project 24PD1.
Good job. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Any nays? Motion's approved unanimously. Thank you. Thanks very much for, as Dr. Gillespie said, for being creative and getting the most bang for our buck for our residents. Really appreciate it. Next is item number 13, Madam Clerk.
Discussion and possible approval of a lease agreement with Advanced Technologies Applications Group Incorporated to lease 5,000 square feet of the Sahuarita Advanced Manufacturing and Technology Center, known as SAMTech.
Thank you. And Victor Gonzalez, our Economic Development and Public Affairs Director, will present this item. Good evening, Victor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Happy to be before you this evening to present you our third lease to SAMTech for Advanced Technologies Application Group, known as ATAC. The tenant, Josh Kaufman, the CEO for ATAC, sends his regards. He wanted to be here today, but is traveling to Virginia as we speak to meet with clients. He was in attendance Friday for the State of the Town and had the opportunity to meet some of our community members and make some connections already here with our other tenants at SAMTech. He did leave with us the security deposit for the lease, knowing that there was some confidence in his part that the lease would be executed. So we'll certainly take the security deposit.
Absolutely. This fills up SAMTech, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So this will be our third and final lease, making the facility fully occupied. A little bit about the square footage. ATAC is proposing at least 5,000 square feet, right smack in the middle of SAMTech. To give you some further context, the facility itself is a total of 32,000 square feet. So to the south of ATAC is Power Photonic, and to the north of the 5,000 square feet, the bottom part of that visual is Global Water Resources. So what is being proposed tonight through the lease contract is 5,000 square feet for a 5-year term. We're very optimistic that that 5-year lease could be extended for additional 5. There is a strong commitment on the part of Josh Kaufman to being here long-term. And so we're encouraged by the conversations we had early on with him and the opportunity that we may have to extend that 5-year to an additional 5 years. But for the lease contract itself, we have the 5 years reflected in there. The lease, the base rent is 65 cents per square foot, triple net, and is subject to a 3% annual increase plus the rental tax of 2.5%. Very similar, actually the exact same rental rate that the other tenants have according to their contract. We are providing a tenant improvement allowance, very similar to the other tenants, in which we are providing $25 per square foot for a total of $125,000, and that will be reimbursed to the tenant upon submitting invoices to the town. So again, very market comparable to the tenant improvement allowance we're providing to ATAC. A little bit about the company itself. It is relocating from Orange County, California. We had the...
As all smart people would do to this.
Absolutely. Their first site visit to Sahuarita was, I believe, April, May of this year. It was a lead from the Arizona Commerce Authority. So Jamie Kerr, who is the rural representative for Arizona Commerce Authority, made connection to our organization, of which then a site visit followed, and they had the opportunity to tour Samtec, to learn more about the community. There was many emails and phone call exchange after the first visit, and then there was a second site visit in which there was an opportunity for Mayor Murphy to visit with them, as well as our town manager, Mr. Dilly, and really sell them a little bit more on Sahuarita. But I think by that point, he was already sold.
Oh, come on, you gotta give us some credit for helping out.
You pushed them over the edge,
Oh, thank
I
you.
should
I
say.
appreciate
They will be establishing a state-of-the-art 3D printing design and scanning center. Much of the technology that is taking place there with Samtec, like Power Photonic, when you start talking about their technology, it goes over my head. All I know is that they have huge equipment, of which then they're using different type of plastic adaptive materials and creating different types of widgets for the aerospace and defense sector, as well as the shoe apparel industry. They have some interesting connections with Adidas and some very interesting customers that make use of Adidas in the shoe apparel industry. So all that is going to be happening at Samtec in terms of the 3D printing and scanning center. And so we'll see a lot of that technology here. And this will be their corporate headquarters. They do have a facility in Las Cruces, but there is interest in combining and bringing the Las Cruces facility to Sahuarita and really having it all take place in here at Samtec. So we're excited. It's a great company. A little bit about the economic impact of what they'll be generating. So within the first year of operations, they'll have 4 full-time employees and 3 part-time. The majority of those employees will be relocating from the Orange County facility. And he is, as he shared with me this last Friday, he is now beginning to try to recruit locally a couple other positions, and so we'll make that connection for him in the coming days. You can see the payroll numbers in year 1, but at full production, as he goes into year 3, year 4, and 5, he expects to have about 20 full-time employees with an average wage anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000. Type of jobs that we'll see there, well, the CEO will be based here. So Josh Kaufman fully expects to relocate to the area, and we'll have a number of high-level positions such as material engineers, senior engineers, and folks working on the production side. So very comparable to the type of labor force that we have in our community. The wage also very comparable to what we see demographically in our community. And the type of activity with this company, very much what we've been wanting to attract is these high-tech companies. So very excited to have ATAC be a member of our community, along with Power Photonic. Goes without saying, Hydronaulics, that's been operating in Sahuarita for a number of years. I think we're starting to see a tech industry cluster formation or taking form here in our community with this company and the recent companies that have located in Samtec.
And I'm assuming, Victor, because of the product they produce, whether it's Power Photonics, or even Global Water Resources with their technology, or hydronaulics, I could see all kinds of cross-pollination going on with using each other's technology, correct?
Absolutely. There was some encouraging conversations between Power Photonic and ATAC this past Friday at the State of the Town. They were able to meet one another, and they were already talking about how they can collaborate where Power Photonic may make use of some of their services for the 3D printing.
Thanks, very exciting. Does that complete your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Yes, Diane. Oh, there you go.
Congratulations. This
Thank you.
is really big that Samtec is fully occupied. I did have a question. So you said that the town's going to reimburse the tenant upon submission of invoices up to $125,000 for improvements. Is this just for the initial 5-year lease, or is this per every 5-year period?
This is for the 5-year term. So it's a one-time tenant improvement allowance of $125,000.
So if they renew the lease 5 years hence, that's it, they don't get any more money?
It could be a point of negotiation at that
Okay.
time, as a tenant, they may want to negotiate and or expect from the landlord. And so I imagine there'll be a reinitiating of negotiating the terms in the lease contract at that time.
But usually, Victor, isn't it for like putting in bathrooms and installing equipment? So I could see it if they were expanding or there was a new type of equipment or technology, but usually the TI takes care of the run for the most part during a lease,
Okay.
isn't it?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. The TI is really the allowance that builds out some of the base improvements that otherwise are not in the building. So restrooms, as an example, some of the wall systems to create division within the space. So yes, tenant improvements typically are for base building improvements.
One other question.
Yes.
Is there a Samtec 2 in our future?
What do you think, AC? No, I'm just teasing. You can answer that, Victor. Is there a Samtec 2 in the future?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we'll certainly continue to look at opportunities to grow our tech industry sector that we have now, and real estate is key to doing that. So we can certainly look at opportunities in the future.
I think the intent in the original was to prime the pump for the private sector to see the possibilities that would exist and it was a unique opportunity because we had an EDA grant and those types of things, but it really was to spur the public sector, wasn't it?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I think we were able to prove the notion of if you build it, they would come, and
Right.
That has taken place with the Samtec facility. So we would hope now that the private sector can come in and build off what was created with Samtec.
Bill, do you have a question? No. It looks like you did. Debbie? Simon, questions?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
No, good. No further questions. I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Move to approve the lease agreement with Advanced Technologies Application Group Incorporated.
Thank you. Would you have a second? Any further discussion?
Second.
Okay, got a second from Simon and others. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Great job, Victor. Thanks.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing Josh back in town. Just let us know any way we can help. Well, I always committed, we have a study session coming up. It's 8 o'clock. I've committed to try to give a quick 5-minute break. I think Shane's already on it. So let's take a quick 5 and be back in, it's 8:01. So if you can be back in about 4 minutes for 8:05. Session or what? Okay. We are back. Thanks for getting back in 5 minutes. And I didn't know if you wanted to introduce the item. Madam
I
Clerk,
just-
absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I got a little lazy on a study session, sorry.
Presentation and discussion regarding a potential transaction privilege tax, TPT, increase on utility services, and the introduction of a use tax to supplement deficits in the Highway User Revenue Fund, otherwise known as HERF.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Dilly, would you like to introduce this item before we turn it over to AC?
Hello, Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Would like to, this is basically a reset for from our conversations during the budget session for the fiscal year that we're in today. We talked generally about diversification of our revenue. We strategized on how best to tackle a sustainable issue in the HERF fund. We talked about the benefit of having relatively young and new infrastructure in our community, but as time works always against you, that infrastructure, as it ages, becomes more and more expensive. The fund today has a deficit that's largely satisfied by the general fund, and as those needs continue to grow and grow in the HERF department, the pressures on the general fund are going to continue to grow. The council takes, quite and rightfully so, a lot of pride in maintaining a certain type of pavement index that we boast pretty heavily across the region. I think we are looked to largely by the region as a leader in some of our management practices as it pertains to our roadway infrastructure. So we know it's a priority for the council and for our community to maintain the health and sustainability of our HERF fund, which takes care of all of our roadway and our right-of-way maintenance.
Which doesn't look like it'll get any better, which I know we'll go to over the next few years, obviously.
That's right. So it really kind of segued nicely into the need for greater diversification in our revenue source. There's a lot of different ways to approach that topic. At the budget session, we talked about two very specific ways. One of them was the consideration of a utility tax increase, and the other was a consideration of a use tax. AC is here tonight to discuss both of those options with you, what that might look like. But I just wanted to remind the council that this is a continuation of our discussions during the budget retreat, and that the problem still exists today for the HERF fund. And as we put our forecast glasses on and look at the future, it's not going to get any easier. And so it's quite a serious business that we're about tonight, and talking about the health and security of our HERF fund going forward, and the need to diversify our revenues. So with that, I'll turn it over to AC.
Thanks. Good evening, AC.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thank you, Shane, for that. Just as a reminder, this is a study session, so we're not here to take any action tonight. It's really just continuing on with the discussions that we started early in the fiscal year. It's really about providing more analysis and getting direction from council from this point forward. Okay. Oops. Let's see. All right. So what's at stake? So when we're talking about HERF fund deficits, we need to understand what the HERF fund provides to the community. And what you see here is a list of services that are provided by or paid for out of the Highway User Revenue Fund. And basically, the fund pays for the streets division of the Public Works Department. It's our second largest division department that has an operating budget in 2024 of $4.3 million. The streets division takes care of the repair and maintenance of our roadways, bike lanes, right-of-ways, medians, bridges, street lights, and traffic signals. It also pays for our pavement preservation program and our street art projects. Taking care of our roadways is a priority that has been identified within our strategic plan. So this slide should look familiar to you, as we presented something similar during the budget retreat. This one's a little bit different than that one in the fact that this one accounts for the updated U.S. Census population figures that were not available during the budget retreat. And the impact of the lower U.S. Census population estimates was to reduce our state shared fuel taxes that we receive, because that is one of the drivers behind how the state fuel taxes are allocated to local jurisdictions. This slide summarizes the financial problem in the HERF fund and also identifies what the magnitude is. So over the next 5 years, ending balances will decline from 439,000, that's a positive 439,000 at the end of this fiscal year, 2024, to a deficit of 2.42 million in 2028. And not to be outdone by my peers.
But he used green, which is a better pick
Yes,
color
we have
than
a
red.
red downward arrow here. Right. So what you see here is an average deficit of $686,000 annually. And that deficit is on top of the $600,000 subsidy that the general fund already provides to the HERF fund. So we have the subsidy coming over and we still are seeing these deficits. And as a reminder, when we're putting together the budget for fiscal year 2024, we increased that subsidy from $500,000 annually, which has been our historical average, to $600,000.
Right.
And the idea at the time was we were going to fund the Highway User Revenue Fund through fiscal year 25. So this slide during the budget retreat, if you look at this number down here, right, this was a positive number during the budget retreat.
Right.
With the U.S. Census population impacts, this number is now $228,000 in deficit. So now the HERF fund actually runs out of money sometime during fiscal year 2025. We're not even making it through the entire fiscal year. And as we discussed, in order to meet the goals outlined in our strategic plan, we're going to need to come up with some long-term recurring funding source to address the needs on our streets and roadways. The HERF revenues that we're currently receiving and the $600,000 annual transfer is not going to be enough.
And they see if the economy gets worse, that's considering we have HERF funding that actually comes. It's been swept before, as a reminder.
You are preempting a discussion point I have later
Well,
on.
I am
That's-
sorry.
yes,
I'll
that's
shut
a-
up.
That's an excellent point. You are correct. So one of the things we can do is take no action. Well, without action, what happens? Well, that general fund subsidy will grow to $1.34 million per year. And just to kind of put that number in context, that would represent 40% of the net revenues in the general fund. So just for full disclosure, net revenues represents revenues less expenditures, so it's our general fund surplus. But 40% of that would be consumed by the HERF fund, just to fund it through the 5-year program that you see here. And this problem is likely to get much worse after the 5 years. So that's one way that we can handle it, or the other way to handle it is to cut services. So all those things that were determined to be a priority, we can let those things slip. But I don't think that's the direction that council provided to staff, and that's why we're talking about this today. So why is this the case? Why do we have deficits? Well, from a revenue perspective, the primary funding source to maintain our roadways is that state fuel tax. That tax is at 18 cents per gallon today. That tax has been 18 cents per gallon since fiscal year 1989-1990. That 18 cent, the buying power of the 18 cents back then is now 7.5 cents today. Compounding that, vehicles are more fuel efficient now, which means that each vehicle is generating less revenues to the state's HERF fund and then less revenues to us than back in 1989-1990. And compounding on top of that, we have vehicles now that are on our roadways that aren't even paying into the tax, right? The EVs, which are actually heavy vehicles and putting wear and tear on the roadways, they're not paying into this because they don't pump.
Right.
So,
And since everybody will be driving an EV in the next 2 years or so,
2035.
we're going to have...
If the idiots get their way.
so
I
that-
said idiots in case anybody missed that.
So the prospects on this revenue stream, unless something changes, are not favorable.
AC, if I could just add real quick, prospects are really glim, because I have heard Department of Transportation talk about the need to change the fuel tax since I came to the state as a city manager back in 2000.
Right.
So I don't have any hopes or dreams of this legislature having the backbone to do anything about it.
Well, not at nearly $5 a gallon either.
So
Right.
it's a tough issue, and it's one of those things where we either have to say goodbye to some of our priorities and things we hold dear in terms of quality of life here in our community, or we take destiny in our own hands and
Or let
figure
the
out a
quality of
solution.
the road slip, which is,
Because it's not going to happen from the state, is
Right.
I guess what I'm saying.
yep, thanks. Please continue, AC.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From a cost perspective, obviously inflation is driving up our costs, and that's, reduced buying power on the revenue side. But we are also seeing unfunded federal mandates coming our way soon. So the federal government is now going to require us to replace all of our signs and do roadway striping so that there's a certain standard or metric of reflectivity
Activity, yep.
on the signage and striping. And so we're looking at doing a 3-year cycle, so replacing about a third of our signs and striping about a third of our roads every year. This is going to increase our cost to the Highway User Revenue Fund by about $166,000 a year. Now, if we don't do that, what's the consequence? Well, then we're not going to be eligible for federal revenues, federal grants. So,
In addition to that, we enhance our liability, because if there's an accident out
Right.
there, the new standards are in place and we haven't followed those standards, it just doesn't help our situation. So.
Right.
we are a growing community, so we continue to add roads into our inventory. More roads means more costs. Our roadways, bridges, and infrastructure are aging. One of the reasons why we're not deficit already is because a lot of our infrastructure is new. We're a young community. As we age as a community, those infrastructure costs are going to accelerate. Maintenance costs more as the infrastructure ages. These problems are not unique to us, as Shane was mentioning. This is a ubiquitous issue for the state and also local governments, including counties and municipalities. So what's the solution and what are our objectives? Well, our first objective is to protect general fund resources and or to protect the service levels of the streets division. So we've already talked about the service level side and the importance of those services, but let's for a moment consider impacts to the general fund. And, protecting your general fund, the general fund resources can't be overstated, because apart from the streets division and the wastewater division, which have revenue sources to pay for those operations, or some of the operations of the streets division, the general fund pays for every other department, right? Most departments don't generate nearly enough most departments don't generate revenues. Those that do don't generate nearly enough revenues to cover all the operational costs. And if you consider for a moment the police department, our most costly department and also very important department, when we've looked at our, in past budget retreats, when we consider the cost of the police department relative to our entire general fund transaction privilege taxes, it's more costly than the local revenues that we're generating. So we rely heavily upon our state shared revenues to pay for our general fund operations. So, that's fine under normal circumstances, but then the legislature decides that they're going to change the rules on you. And in fact, we saw that this past legislative session, where they even attacked our local control on the that's available to us in the Model City Tax Code by eliminating residential rental taxes. Well, if they're doing that on things that are historically deemed to be part of our local option, how much more so when we're looking at state shared revenues, right? And this goes back to the point that you made earlier, Mr. Mayor. When recessions hit and the state's looking for ways to address their budget concerns, they've passed along costs to us, and they've also attacked revenues in the past. They have done HERF sweeps to pay for things like the Arizona Department of Public Safety, Highway Patrol. Historically, using fuel taxes to pay for highway patrol would have been unorthodox at best.
I know there's some conversations on the agreed upon a flat tax to go to up to 18% towards state shared revenue from the 15 that it was before. But And there's certainly some conversations that could be, brought back on the table, whether it's 17 or 16 or go back. So I don't think we'll see more money flowing as we move forward.
I think we can expect to have less money flowing. I mean, as an example of that, the compromise that was made for Prop 400 resulted in less revenue coming into municipalities in the form of rental tax. So it's just going to be an ongoing issue, which fueled our conversations during the budget retreat for diversification of our revenue source. So we're not so dependent on certain things. So.
Thanks.
So, Mr. Mayor, we've already, our next objective would be to diversify revenues. And we've already identified that the utility and use taxes would be good candidates for this. If we take a look at utility companies, they operate within our right-of-way, so there's a good nexus between the utility tax that we're talking about and the services that the incremental tax would pay for. Also, the establishment of a use tax is really more about fair competition between businesses in the state versus out of state, and we'll address that later, but also any revenues that are generated by the use tax would help to offset some of the impacts of the general fund subsidy to the highway user revenue fund. So all that said, our recommended solutions won't eliminate the need for the general fund to subsidize the HERF fund. If we were trying to do that in one fell swoop, I think our utility tax and our use tax rates would be higher than any of us want to put them. So we're only, excuse me, we're only talking about dealing with the incremental deficit that's in the highway user revenue fund. Excuse me. So because these are, so what we're proposing today is really a shorter term solution, and this will buy us time until we can come up with a longer term solution. And some of the prospects for that, will the state do anything? And I have some discussion points here, but I think Shane has already covered that very well. There's no political wherewithal to address that 18 cents per gallon. I do question whether or not the EV side of it, if there's political wherewithal to at least address that side of it. I would like to think so. In my mind, it seems like there's a connection there between wear and tear. But this is one of the things that I think needs to be on our legislative agenda, and not only ours, but also the leagues. And I think we just have to keep sort of pounding that drum until something changes. But I don't know that, it's something we don't control. Could the RTA be part of the solution? At one point in time, there was some discussion that there might be an O&M component in the RTA Next plan, but I think those discussions have pretty much died off altogether. One way or another, again, this is something that is outside of our control. There's some influence. Obviously, we have a seat on their board, but I don't know that there's political wherewithal at that level to go down that path.
Well, and of course, RTA is up to the voters, so, what's their wherewithal to be able to pass that as well.
And that plan is coming to the voters in May of 2025, I believe it is, correct? Yeah. Okay. So lastly, during the budget retreat, we talked about the potential of maybe creating a special district that would be dedicated either for a transportation use or for another use, and then, that would free up funding. This is a concept that needs to be explored and fleshed out a lot more. The clear advantage of that kind of approach would be it's something that we could control, right? And it could offer a long-term solution depending on how that's structured.
That would have to go to the voters as well, right? You're talking about a formation or a property tax or something along those lines, or
potentially. It's something that could go to the voters, but it just depends on the nature of the district.
Okay.
Yeah. More likely than not, it would probably have to be something that the voters approve, though. All that to say, that's really beyond the scope of tonight's discussion, but I just wanted to put it there as a reminder of some of the discussion that we had earlier.
AC, and I think this is a great reminder, and I think we owe it to ourselves to keep this at the forefront of our mind. What we're talking about tonight is a Band-Aid. It's an interim solution to a long systemic issue in the HERF fund. And so we'll get through tonight and hopefully get some guidance and direction from council on how you want to approach this. But that bottom bullet there on the long term, we're going to have to continue to chew on that one as a council and leadership team, on how we solve that issue, for the future of our community.
Diane?
What is the special district?
Could you give us an example, AC, of a possible one or two that would qualify as a special district?
Our community facilities districts are special districts. The purpose of those districts is to finance public infrastructure within a certain area and then to pay for maintenance on that. So that could be an example.
And that's based off of a property tax.
Right.
So it comes in different forms. You do it through a district. There's other ways. There's the, a dedication of a property tax for public safety. Public safety then is relieved by the tax, and then that general fund source that was supporting public safety then can go and help do other things like solve our HERF problem. But a lot of communities do, these dedicated property taxes for transportation even. So whether you call it a special district or an improvement district or what have you, the idea is that the public benefiting from those services are paying for those services.
Right. And that would be lockboxed, wouldn't it, AC? I mean, if you're doing it for, let's say, public safety, it could not be used for anything else. You have to show all that money for that property tax is going for what it was used for or voted on for.
Yeah, but the fungibility allows you to move other money that would have gone there.
Would have gone there, right?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it just depends on the type of district that you form. I mean, some of the examples we've seen is where they would take a primary property tax to the voters. We've gone down this road before for a fire district, right? Or for a fire department, I should say.
Right.
And there's no way to.
Oh, that's right.
Council can do an internal restriction, but there wasn't like a legal
Right.
restriction on
And
it.
I remember that's probably one of the reasons it failed, because there wasn't confidence that it would be used for what it was intended for. Got it.
Mayor, actually, if you're going to tie it to property taxes, there is a highway or street improvement bond that could be issued that has to go to the voters, and it is paid back usually through property tax. At the same time, you could, if you're going to increase TPT across the board, for instance, the council may refer it to the voters. And if you refer it to the voters and said this 1 cent or percent is going to go to the public to fund public safety, it would pretty much be locked in.
Right. Right.
There's ways.
There's ways
There's
to
ways.
message it and also show it as well. Thanks.
So here's another slide that should look familiar to everybody. It shows how our TPT rates compare to that of other Pima County municipalities. And with the exception of residential rental tax, which is identified on the third row there, rental and leasing, you see that some of them have -/2%. The dash would represent the residential rental side. So Sahuarita doesn't have that. We assess a 2% tax on residential and commercial. There's no distinction. But on the residential side, you have to be in the business of renting residential properties, which means 3 or more properties in the state of Arizona, for which your property in Sahuarita or your properties in Sahuarita would be subject to the tax. But with that one exception, the town has the lowest or tied for the lowest sales tax rates in the region. However,
I'm sorry, AC, could you just, while you're on that slide, just touch on the difference between the use tax as a reminder, unless that's a slide coming up, as opposed to the utility tax?
there will be a slide coming up on
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
But I can address it now if you'd
No,
prefer.
no.
Okay. All right. We have the lowest, or the tied for the lowest sales taxes in the region. But however, effective January 1, 2025, there goes our residential rental tax, thanks to the state legislature and the governor's office. And then we will once again be the lowest in every category, lowest or tied for the lowest in every category. Tonight, we're focusing on utilities and use taxes, so we'll want to pay closer attention to those two rows, and I'll walk you through those. Sahuarita has a 2% utility tax rate. That is half of Oro Valley and Marana's, which are the next highest up. Then there's Tucson. Tucson has a 2.6% utility tax rate, but on top of that, they have a 4.5% right-of-way tax rate that applies. Now they're a charter city, so they have different things that they can do. And then South Tucson has a 5.5% utility tax rate. With respect to the use tax, you see that only Marana and Tucson have use taxes. Marana has a tiered rate structure, 2.5% and 2%. 2.5% applies to the first $5,000, and then 2% after that $5,000. If you look at City of Tucson, their use tax rate is 2.6%, and again, I'll get into what a use tax is.
So in Marana's case, that kick-in at 2%, would that be more like commercial properties and things that would apply to because of the cost of?
Cars and boats,
cars.
things like
Okay.
that, yeah, primarily. It's the high dollar cost items.
RVs, recreational
Yeah.
stuff, boats, things
Yeah,
like that.
boats. Total general fund transaction privilege taxes are 9.37 million, and I explained earlier that that is less than the police department budget. Utility taxes make up 10% or 946,000 of the total. Utility TPT is generated from electric and power utility companies, gas utility companies, and water utility companies. It does not include wastewater, and wastewater is excluded because I think the argument is that would be a form of double taxation. You're taxing water and then you're taxing wastewater. So wastewater is not included at all. It's not taxed. And then phone and cable, sometimes people ask questions about that. Would that be a utility tax? And that's not. That falls under the communications classification. All Arizona municipalities must use the Model City Tax Code, although charter cities have a little bit more leeway in this, but for the most part, we all kind of fall under the same umbrella. And that's intended to bring a level of consistency across the state for the taxpayer. If you consider the business that operates in many municipalities, filing your taxes would just be this cumbersome burden if everybody could just do whatever they wanted on their TPT, right? So the Model City Tax Code was bringing a
So how does Marana on option 13 not use that because they're not a charter city?
Mr. Mayor, I will hopefully address that in just a second.
Sorry.
Yeah, so
I'm reading ahead, I'm sorry.
And that's, so we all fall under the Model City Tax Code, but the Model City Tax Code does allow us to set our own rates, and it provides for certain prescribed options that local jurisdictions can, vote to have in or vote to include in their tax code. So for utility taxes, there are 3 options that apply. And I'll point out that the Model City Tax Code standard language actually provides a tax credit for any franchise fee that a utility is paying to the municipality. So model option 13 would eliminate that language. It does away with that tax credit. And again, that shows a theoretical nexus between the utility tax, franchise fees, and utility companies working in our right-of-ways. But for looking at model option 13, you see that every municipality has opted to eliminate that tax credit. So we've opted into option 13. Marana has not. Marana's tax code sticks with the standard language.
Okay.
However, it's somewhat moot because Marana doesn't have any franchise agreements apart from their cable one with Comcast. And just bonus material, same thing with Oro Valley. Oro Valley, their only franchise agreement is with Comcast as well. So there are no electric or water or gas utility franchise agreements like we have in Sahuarita. So again, the Model City Tax Code allows us to select, do we want this option or not this option? So in this model option 13, we all said yes in Pima County, but for Marana. Local option GG. states that the tax will apply when a utility operates within a municipality, but it provides service outside of the jurisdiction's boundaries. And all Pima County municipalities, but for South Tucson, have opted into that option. Option PP, this one's kind of lengthy. It exempts the cost of utilities purchased by qualified manufacturing or smelting businesses, and I should have added to it, or certain international operation centers that are certified by the Arizona Commerce Authority, and no Pima County municipalities have opted into that. In fact, Buckeye's the only one in the state that has. So now that we have that basic foundation, we can start to look at how much of an increment in our utility tax it would take to address our HERF deficits. So for each 0.5% increment to the utility tax, we would generate approximately $236,000. So to cover the HERF deficits of $738,000, and that would be in year 5, we'd need somewhere between a 1.5% and 2% incremental increase. And if we split the difference, that would bring the total rate to 3.75%, and it would generate an additional $828,000. And that obviously exceeds the annual deficit that we see in the HERF fund. Keep in mind, however, that our financial policies state that the HERF fund should also establish its own minimum fund balance reserve. And just like the general fund, where we say 25% of our budgeted operating costs, we should have at least that amount set aside. Right? As it's not the emergency fund, it's actually on top of that emergency fund, right? Just in case, you never know what's going to happen. That's just best practice. Well, the HERF fund has that same requirement. So we need to fill up that pot over time. So when we're looking at this example of 3.75%, $828,000 compared to the $738,000, that would add $90,000 a year into that bucket, if you will, that fund balance bucket. Now, at the end of fiscal year 2024, we're not at zero yet. We're on our path towards zero. That's what we're trying to avoid. But at the end of fiscal year 2024, we're saying we're going to have about $439,000 in that bucket. So there's still a ways to go between the 439 and the 1.26 million that you see on this slide. To the degree that the HERF fund doesn't establish its own reserves, the general fund has to do it on behalf of the HERF fund. Because, you know, if something happens on our streets, I mean, we're going to have to address the issue if it's an emergency type of situation. Okay, exploring this a little bit further, here's our current utility TPT structure when we're comparing against the different types of utilities that are impacted by this tax rate. And you can see that we have electric, gas, and water are all at 2%. But if we want to account for the total tax impacts, which I would argue is more appropriate, we need to introduce the franchise fees into the mix. So we layer in franchise fees. And now we have electric and water have a combined tax rate of 2%, and then the combined tax rate for gas would be at 4%. Thinking back to the rate comparison slide, you know, this would still look pretty good relative to the other jurisdictions. 2% in the other in electric, and water is below 4% of the other jurisdictions, and even with the franchise tax at 4%, we're on par with the other jurisdictions. But what would happen if we were to implement the solution that we discussed on the last slide? Right, that'd be a 3.75% rate. The 2% franchise tax would still apply on the gas side. So for electric and water, the combined rate would be 3.75%. Gas would be at 5.75%.
AC, have you run a comparison where on the gas side we kept the can you parse out? Can you do a utility TPT rate at 2%? No, instead of going from the top box to the bottom box where the electric goes to 3.75, so you end up at 3.75, and the water would do it, but if you kept the gas utility TPT at 2, Or you are not allowed to, you're not allowed to do
You,
that?
yeah, Mr. Mayor, you have a utility tax rate that applies to all those utilities.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
you can't componentize it that way.
Right, so to keep the 5.75 for the gas, the only thing we could do is move the franchise fee down?
Well, you could adopt that one option. That would credit back the franchise fee tax. What was it, GG or PP or?
Yeah,
Yes.
GG.
Not GG.
GG.
It's,
You could opt.
it's option 13.
You could opt, okay, you could opt out of that or go back to the model tax code and credit back the 2%, so the net for gas would be 375.
Right, right, or even, I'm not even saying back to 375, but they're already at 4, and you're bringing everybody else close to 4, but keeping maybe gas at 4,
Mr. Mayor,
with
members-
using the franchise fee.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I am going to take care of this issue. So I've got a slide for this, if you just hang on for 1 second.
Okay, I won't say another word until you finish.
All right.
For the third time I said that.
So,
Yes, Diane?
Why is the gas?
Microphone?
Why is the gas combined tax rate 4% and the electric and water is 2%? Could you help me understand that better?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the reason for that is because the utility transaction privilege tax is 2%, but we also have a franchise agreement with Southwest Gas that they pay a 2% franchise fee or franchise tax to the town. So the combined impact on gas is 4%.
And the others don't have their
And the
franchise
others
fee.
do not have
Thank
franchise
you.
agreements. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, so we already talked about the componentization of the rates and how we compare. And again, you know, if we're looking at electric and water, I think we compare favorably to our sister towns of Marana and Oro Valley. But when we're looking at the gas side of it, you know, even though I believe we can justify this from a financial standpoint, I'm not quite sure that's where we want to be. And hearing some discussion, I think there's some level of agreement with that. So is there a better solution? I believe that there is. What if we raise the rate to 4% and provide a franchise fee credit?
So option 13, right?
Option 13, correct. We eliminate option 13, which means we go back to the standard language of the Model City Tax Code, which would exempt franchise taxes. So the impact of that, and you can kind of see it there, that the gas net utility TPT rate is 2%. And the reason why that's a net utility TPT rate is because we've got, the rate's going to be 4%, but the tax code provision is going to say, if you pay franchise fees, we're going to give you a tax credit on the TPT side
Right,
for
right,
that.
right, right.
So
Got
the
it.
net TPT on gas is 2%.
Got it.
The 2% franchise tax is still going to apply.
Right.
We've got 4% across the board for all utilities
Got it.
when that happens.
I should have, yes.
So the credit goes back to the gas company, right? Do we know that that will go back to the customers or that they won't be charged? Can we just increase the franchise tax to electric and water?
We don't have
Instead?
a franchise agreement with
We don't have a franchise agreement with
We'll
them.
just make
Yeah,
one.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, to have a franchise agreement, you need to have the voters approve it.
Which then would be passed on to the user.
To the voters.
Yeah.
I would.
Okay, in business, all taxes
Get
are
passed
paid
on.
for by the consumer. They just collect them. It is a cost of doing business, and it is carried over to the consumer. Just understand that, and everything else makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of
Yes.
the council, in Arizona, we have a transaction privilege tax. It is not a sales tax. In some states, with a sales tax, the liability shifts over to the purchaser. And yeah, you know, the business collects on behalf of basically the consumer and passes it to the jurisdiction. In Arizona, this is a business tax. And yes, they will itemize it on your bill, and you should see that componentized on your bill. And they should be charging the right tax rate. If we see a utility tax that's not correct, we would contact the business because we pay it as well.
Thanks. Please continue.
All right, so if we were to do this, this is how we would compare to our sister towns of Marana and Oro Valley. So not only would we be 4% for each type of utility, we would also be 4% across all those at the lowest tax rate for all the Pima County jurisdictions. We wouldn't be below them like we are now, but we'd be on par with them. We wouldn't be higher than them. So all utilities have the same effective tax rate. Towns, same effective tax rate, which is in the lowest category in the county. And net revenues in this particular case would be $780,000, which is actually less than the other option by $50,000. But it's still more than the $738,000 HERF deficit. So we're covering our annual deficits, and we're able to still put money into that fund balance bucket. It's just not going in quite as fast as it would with the 3.75% rate.
Right.
So moving on to use taxes. So what are use taxes? It's a tax imposed when a tax is not paid on purchases made from an out-of-state business. It's worth noting that if you pay a tax to an out-of-state vendor, you get credit for that on the use tax in Arizona. So Arizona has a 5.6% use tax. If you pay 5% to another state for taxes on a sales tax transaction, you would only owe the state of Arizona the difference.
Can you give a real world example of that?
Absolutely. You go to purchase a vehicle from an out-of-state dealership, and they don't charge you a use tax. When you go to register your vehicle in the state of Arizona, the Motor Vehicle Division will say, guess what? You owe 5.6% to the state of Arizona. If you buy a boat, same thing. That's not collected by Motor Vehicle Division. That would be collected by the Game and Fish, I believe.
Okay. So the state collects it, but they pass it on to us because of the...
If we have a use tax.
If we have a use tax, it passes on.
Yes, if we had a use tax, it wouldn't be the 5.6%, it'd be 5.6% plus whatever rate we established.
Right. Okay.
What's the purpose of this tax? Well, it's to protect Arizona sellers, businesses that otherwise would be at a competitive disadvantage with out-of-state vendors. Stated another way, it's to promote fair competition between out-of-state and Arizona-based businesses. Some facts, I've already mentioned the state rate of 5.6%. It's noteworthy to know that that rate is the same as their standard transaction privilege tax. And that's a theme throughout all the local jurisdictions too. Those rates coincide in most cases. Arizona first imposed a use tax in 1955, so this is nothing new. It's been around for a long time. And every state that has a sales tax or transaction privilege tax, whatever they call it, every state also imposes a use tax. And about 2/3 of the Arizona municipalities impose a use tax. Like the utility tax, the use tax provisions fall under the Model City Tax Code, and there are a number of local options that apply to use taxes. And you can see how that looks like for Marana and Tucson on this slide, as well as the equivalency for the state, which the state does not follow the Model City Tax Code, but they're pretty similar. So I'm going to run down these as quickly as possible so that you have a sense. The next slide is a reference slide that defines these, but I think given the nature of this being a study session, it's worthwhile going through it. So option V would provide for a tiered rate structure, and that's what we saw with Marana. Marana uses a tiered rate structure, so they've exercised this option. City of Tucson does not. They have not exercised this option. Option X exempts fine art purchased from the original artist, so that would not be subject to use tax. But the art in question is art that is aesthetic only. If it has a utilitarian purpose, then it's going to be subject to the tax. So if an artist makes jewelry, well, you can wear jewelry that's utilitarian, the use tax applies. If it's a painting and you hang it on a wall, that would be exempt from use taxes. Option Z exempts textbooks sold by bookstore, and the types of textbooks we're talking about are those that would be required by a state university or a community college. Option AA exempts food that's consumed by the owner or employees of a restaurant or bar that's already subject to transaction privilege taxes. Option HH exempts tangible property that's donated to certain nonprofit organizations. Option JJ exempts municipalities, or it would exempt the town if that was exercised. Option LL assesses jet fuel tax based on a cents per gallon basis instead of a percent, and any amounts that would exceed 10 million gallons per year would be exempt from use taxes altogether. And option PP is the same like we talked about in the utility tax, and that would exempt the cost of utilities purchased by qualified manufacturing or smelting businesses or certain international operation centers that are certified by the Arizona Commerce Authority. So on this slide, you'll notice that the state offers the highest number of exemptions compared to Marana and Tucson. So I'll point out that there's a number of exemptions here, but there are a lot more in the use tax codes that aren't here. Most of them are fixed, and you don't have an option for those exemptions. These are just the ones that have options available. So what is staff recommending? Well, we are recommending to address the problem, to increase our utility tax to 4%. That would be a 2% incremental increase. We are recommending that we provide a tax credit for franchise fees paid, and that would mean that we would eliminate model option number 13. And just as a side note, by doing that, that actually may help to promote franchise agreements, because now if franchise agreements come to the voters, there's no sort of negative tax impact to them. And yet franchise agreements are a good thing both for the utility and for the town. So I think that maybe expands our ability to move forward with some of those things. Staff is also recommending that we dedicate this incremental increase to the streets function. And we're talking color of money, right? It should go directly into the Highway User Revenue Fund. So that's why we have a gray arrow up, because if you recall, the black and dark gray tones represent Highway User Revenue Fund, our streets function. So we're looking at net revenues of a positive $780,000 that would address the deficits, and that would start allowing us to put away some money into the HERF reserves. Staff is also recommending that we establish a use tax, and to set that rate at 2%, which is consistent with our retail TPT, and that's what most jurisdictions do. That seems to level the playing field the best. And we are also suggesting that we elect the same model city tax code options that are consistent with the state. So not only does the state offer the most number of exemptions to the use tax, but really this is about what's easiest for our tax filers. Right, so it'd be as simple as if you pay the state a use tax, then you're going to have to pay the town a use tax. If you don't pay the state a use tax, it's not going to apply here. It just seems to be easiest for everybody. And these businesses and people should already be, well, mostly businesses, not necessarily individuals, but businesses are all going to be used to doing this, so this isn't going to be too earth-shattering for them as far as the burden increase. So, we know how much we're going to generate in net revenues on utility taxes. Use tax there's not a lot of good information on it. It just depends on how many purchases are made to vendors outside of the state of Arizona that don't assess a tax or collect a tax on behalf of the state. I asked ADOR for some information because ADOR knows how many people in our community or businesses in our community have paid them a use tax. Had they been willing to share that information to me, I would have been able to have a pretty decent estimate here, but it's privileged information and I'm not privileged enough to know it. So what I can give you is I can use a town example just to kind of give you the magnitude. In fiscal year 2023, we paid $32,000 of use taxes to the Arizona Department of Revenue because we are not exempt. This represented a 0.14% of our total non-payroll spending, which was $22.6 million. So of the $22.6 million, $32,000 went to the state for use taxes at the 5.6% rate. If we look to Marana, their use tax generates about 1.8% of their total TPT. I don't like using that connection because, you know, your TPT represents sales that are generated within the community,
Right.
not purchases that are made outside of the community. So that connection is not great. But if we say that the business dynamics here are similar to there, then we come up with an amount that I've included in your report and that's on the slide, and that's net revenues of about $250,000. But I'm going to throw out there that number could be significantly less than that.
Right.
You know, so our perspective here is we're not necessarily trying to bridge any of the HERF deficits. This is really about protecting the general fund and offsetting some of the subsidy that goes to HERF, and any little bit that we get from this would help that. But it's really a policy decision in trying to sort of keep our brick and mortar establishments on an equal playing field with out-of-state businesses. So next steps would be, well, we would like to hear from you. We'd like council feedback and direction. Just as far as timelines are concerned, it depends on where this discussion goes, but the earliest any action you could take would be on the October 23rd council meeting, and we'd have to hold a public hearing before any ordinance could be adopted to change anything that we've talked about tonight. And of course, if it's a public hearing, we have public notice obligations that we'd also have to post prior to that meeting. And if we were to take it to the next meeting and you were to adopt the ordinance and make these tax changes, the earliest implementation date would be January 1st, 2024, because the Arizona Department of Revenue needs 60 days to retool their systems and also put out notice to the general taxpayer community. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd entertain any
Sure.
feedback
Well,
or
thanks.
questions.
Well, obviously, we have a problem. There's different ways we can address it. I certainly wouldn't want to be above our sister communities, me personally, you know, in southern Arizona. So first blush, you know, I'm comfortable with what I saw from there. So I'll leave it at there and let others people speak. Diane?
Yeah, so if we do what you recommend, how many years' time does it buy us where the HERF is is not in the red? Because that slide was going down.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, well, it's hard to know and predict what the future holds, but at least in our 5-year forecast, we'd be able to cover our annual deficits over the 5 years and still build up a little bit more of a reserve than what we have currently. You know, beyond that, you know, at what rate do our costs accelerate or that we have further deterioration of our HERF revenues?
Right.
It's hard to know.
Right, and that's why I think Shane brought up earlier, there would be further, maybe other types of discussions, but this is kind of that 5-year, you know, Band-Aid type of environment, why we continue to have, I'm assuming, to continue to have those discussions.
During our budget discussion in April, we had talked about this buying us time to evaluate options that may need to have an election
Right.
tied to it for 2026 or 2028, you know,
Right.
that kind of thing. So that's really kind of in that 5-year timeline.
Because those discussions could be a little bit more tougher, especially messaging it back to the voters on why we would want to even consider doing some of these other options that we have. Dr. Gillespie?
I like the use tax. I hate raising utility taxes just because everyone has to pay them no matter where they are economically, and that's hard. So use taxes, someone's buying cars or boats, I'm less worried about them. But let's be cautious with raising utility taxes.
Now, when you say that, just to give staff some direction, because right now there's a recommendation to raise it to the other communities like Oro Valley and Marana. Are you saying that you wouldn't potentially support that? Because then the other conversation, what I think would have to be, or staff would have to come back, is what we wouldn't do in the, from using the general fund, whether it be hiring or whatever else, or are you okay with letting the quality of the roads slide? Because there's kind of only 3 options that we can actually help do on there. So
Sure.
it's kind of, if we're not going to go there, what would you be comfortable cutting?
That's a fair question. I know that we want to diversify our income streams. I would, versus utilities, even going after the retail tax, increasing that from 2 to 2.5. We're at 2 right now, correct?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, our retail TPT is 2%.
And even though we say, well, everyone needs to buy things as well, it's a lot easier to buy less things and keep your heat on or keep your air conditioning on. And that would be money coming from the general fund. And maybe we don't need to raise all 2%, but look at the 1.5 or 1.75. I just want to use some caution there. So I'd be okay with borrowing more from the general fund and looking for other opportunities as well.
Okay, thanks. Bill?
Yeah, I can live with their recommendation.
Debbie? Okay. All right. So
I can live with it.
So we have, and then we don't have Simon and we don't have Kara. Kara or Simon, are you still on? Well, Simon actually texted me. He had to drop off, so I know he's not on, but I don't think Kara's come back yet.
I haven't heard Kara come back in yet, so.
Well, if you could, maybe have a separate meeting, on the one-on-ones or something with them, and then kind of sharing. There was kind of a 4-1 sort of split. Now, if you change, get back to Shane.
And I understand. I can be outvoted on things, or
Yeah.
Not that this is a vote.
Right. No, it's fine to be different. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe AC, just for an exercise, depending how hard the exercise is, taking Dr. Gillespie's, thoughts, and because I don't know what differentiation it would mean from a revenue side and how the bucket fills up, if that's, one of the options. But I think it would be good to find out, for he would know. Shane? Or not?
I think it's really hard for us to pinpoint, as us as staff, to pinpoint what a use tax is really going to generate.
Right.
I mean, we have no idea really. I mean, it
Right.
could be 50,000, it could be
Well, and I agree with
200,000.
AC, because if you're tying it to the retail collection, which I know Marana has been, they're 20 years older than we are, so they're going to have a higher number from that. And then if you tie the 1.8% to it, well, that's going to be higher. But we're probably, to your point, Shane, we're probably going to be to the lower end. I'm guessing, we'll probably be lucky at 100,000.
We're quite a bit more confident in what, the utility tax is going to generate.
Right.
That's more knowable.
Yes.
Yes, and if we're not looking at a utility tax, but you'd like to consider, some kind of combination of an unknown use tax and playing around with either further subsidizing with our general fund dollars, or looking at a TPT adjustment, that's just a much bigger conversation for the council to engage in, because the options are way more in terms of, how to factor all that in. We'd need some very specific instruction from council on that.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So I think, yeah, again, two council members aren't here, so I'd probably like Shane to get their thoughts on it, but if you can share kind of where.
But even tonight, I think we have some
Some
pretty clear
direction.
direction.
Yeah,
from
I wanted to
council.
make sure you were,
Yeah.
you felt like you had some direction.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
even without talking to them,
Yep.
we've got direction, so.
Absolutely. Okay. Any concluding thoughts, AC, other than thanks from our part, from doing all of this and kind of watching the books, so to speak? Because again, something has to give at some point. Either we have to get more revenue or we have to cut services in one area or another, whether it's the quality of the roads or other things we're attempting to do. So,
Or the quality of my sleep. that I'm
or the
missing.
quality of your sleep.
With that, Mr. Mayor, to answer your question, I have no further
Okay,
comments.
so having no more further business for the council, we're adjourned, and I'll see hopefully everybody on the 23rd.